Hello, everyone. Bisexual President Donald Jen Trump here.
I can't believe we got the first LGBT president before GTA 6, bro.
Did you think this was how we were going to get our first queer president, Jake?
Well, listen, if anybody has ever tried to convince themselves that Donald Trump was not already the queeniest, fucking most like
He is the
drag race
queeniest
judge ass,
president. We
like
already knew that.
he is
That's why he's so fun to make
absolutely.
fun of, is that he is the queeniest
Like
president.
exactly. Like he's bitchy, he's catty, like literally the only thing keeping him from LGBTQ plus status was the fact that he hadn't sucked a dick. And now
Unless.
bottom J Trump?
Bottom
Hmm.
J Trump. That's great. Donald Jen Trump is one thing, but bottom J Trump is another. Um, Apologies
um
in advance for sexy phlegm Jen right now. The universe
we
has already decided that I shouldn't be allowed to win this episode by almost causing me to lose my voice. But I kid you
middle
not,
of no
literally,
look.
as the hours passed today, I heard my voice like improving again. And I sound a little bit better than I did a few hours ago. So I'm ready. I'm ready to compete.
It's
This
because
is
this
this is
is
the
this is the
one.
2025 finale, baby. This is it.
Yeah, yeah. Let's go into that because
Are you nervous? I'm a little
I am.
nervous.
I'm actually am nervous because
It's
we're taking a break from this after the holidays, and I'm
mhm.
seeing you literally 3 days after we record this. So what happens this episode will determine our interaction.
It will at least determine how good of a weekend we're both about to have at the very least. We're gonna set the tenor for the next year. We can promise you some new stuff is on the horizon, and as of right now, Jen and I are talking about doing some end of the year stuff. We can promise that there is a end of the year video about albums of this year that we will be doing, but it's going to be a little different than things we've done in the past, in the competitive spirit of this show, in fact. And we're also going to be doing a little bit more of a chill, our favorite things that we experienced this year, like we did last year, which is just going to be more general. And expect some new coming things in the new year. But in order to cross that bridge, we need to commence with the 2025 finale. So, firstly, one thing I want to mention is that we're talking about two excellent albums this week that I have been looking forward to for a long time,
Hell
honestly.
yeah, we have.
Uh, and like a lot of weeks, it was kind of sad that we could only pick two to talk about because I kind of think that last week may have ended up being the best release for music of the entire year, very quietly, because I had to shout out just a couple of things that came out that are worthy of note, and that honestly, we may look at some of these albums in retrospect at the start of next year if new releases are on the slower side, which they usually are. So we may come back to a couple of these in a lot more detail. But the first thing I want to shout out is the fact that we kind of mentioned this in a previous episode, but now that it's basically the end of the year, I just want to throw it to Magdalena Bay for throwing out eight of like the best pop songs of the last 5 years
They're
that have been
really
released this
fucking with
year.
me on this because me this year, I've become a full, like, I don't listen to singles. I wait for the album ass
Hmm.
motherfucker. But then this keeps happening and there's no news that an album is coming. And so I'm just like, okay, I've only listened to the first four. I only listened to the first two drops that they did.
They
But
are all excellent.
if I get desperate, I'm going to listen to the rest of them
They
just
are
because
excellent, and they're
Renee
all
and I are
excellent in
really big
different
fans of
ways.
Mag Bay. And so Renee has probably listened to the new one that came out this past week as well and just not told me about it. But when I saw it, I was like, what the fuck is going on?
It's crazy good. They are proving to be one of the most exciting acts in modern music, and I was already like head over heels for them when Imaginal Disc came out. So obviously there's that, but a little bit more specifically, we got the surprising follow-up chapter to an album and an artist that had been dropped earlier this year, which is FKA Twigs dropped Eusexua Afterglow, which is the kind of
Yes.
companion album to Eusexua, which was an album I really enjoyed and thought was like I'd kind of been chomping at the bit for a new proper FKA Twigs album because I'm a huge fucking fan, but also we haven't gotten a full-fledged album since 2019, technically speaking, because Capri Songs was kind of a mixtape and it was kind of a different thing in general. But I thought it was a really good return for her, but it wasn't, my favorite project that she has made. Eusexua Afterglow, on the other hand, I think is more sonically consistent, more sonically like it's like just generally much more kempt of a record than Eusexua. Kind of the appeal of that album is that it's just kind of all over the place. This, on the other hand, this is beats for the club. There is shit on here
Oh,
like
let's go.
Love
I haven't listened to
Crimes
this yet, so I'm
and
so excited.
Hard. There's Wild and Alone with Pink Pantheress. This is 40 minutes of pulse pounding dance music and some weirder extended art pop jams. There's a song as like gorgeous as something like Slushy is just like, oh, it's incredible. This is a really good album that I think actually improves on the existing album in a couple of ways. Like it's my preferred release of the two. But besides that, we also got an Armand Hammer record, a new album from Billy Woods and
Yes.
Elucid. They teamed up with The Alchemist to give us Mercy. I haven't gotten to this yet, but I mean, literally the personnel involved, it's got to be good. People are
We
saying
talked
good
about Billy
things
Woods
about
a
it.
lot together.
Yeah,
We were big fans of Billy Woods,
it
and
last
I haven't
week
gotten to
I
this
kind
either because again, this is a busy fucking week, but
like
I'll get to
last
it.
week I was talking about how I think that there's probably not been somebody who's had a better 2020s hip hop wise than Aesop Rock, and I stupidly forgot that Billy Woods is also in that conversation. He's in first place, and I can only guess that Mercy is just in addition to that. Aesop can be comfortable with a silver medal there as far as I'm concerned. But we also got a new album from the Mountain Goats, Through the Fire, Across from the Balkan. It's supposed to be good. I haven't listened to it quite yet, but we also got an album from one of my favorite sort of underrated modern singer-songwriters, Stella Donnelly. New album from her called Love and Fortune that's supposed to be very good. Her album, her like debut record was something that a lot of people kind of wrote about when it came out. Go listen to that if you haven't. And perhaps my favorite release of the entire week, very narrowly, though I will say we are going to be more properly talking about one that almost defeated this for my favorite release of the week. But Rosalia, pop
Oh,
star,
I need
Spanish
to
pop
listen to this
star
shit so
Rosalia
bad. I need to
has
get
come
to
out.
this so badly.
I
Oh
th- this
man.
is this is less an endorsement for Lux right now because honestly, this is an album that I think we probably should talk about in the coming new year because it's big and it's dense in a word, but like this album, she speaks 15 languages on this son of a bitch. This is a full-blown art pop opera with modern production techniques that sound like they span from like the FKA Twigs record to like Sophie to like there's some
Mm.
more like modern trap stuff on here. Rosalia has quietly become one of the best, coolest, most cutting edge pop stars alive. I have become a tremendous fan of hers because I didn't pay attention just because the most recent album she'd released before this was Motomami, which got a
That
lot of
got a lot of
acclaim when it
hype
came out.
though.
And it was kind of like sold to people as basically being like this is the art pop like equivalent to Yeezus. And like honestly, I yes, that is 100% what Motomami is. I came into contact with her because of her acclaimed album El Mal Querer, which is this sort of art pop and like flamenco and sort of Latin pop fusion together, which is this gorgeous, incredible record. But I think that her most recent album here, Lux, may be the most striking and interesting thing she's made. I can't quite compare this to basically anything I've ever heard, but it is a fucking statement. This is somebody who's been like, she appeared on a Björk song recently, and she also has Björk on this record on the lead single that also had Eve Toomer on it. And this is
Crazy,
somebody who is
crazy pulls.
she's throwing down the gauntlet on this album. Like she doesn't just like Björk, she wants to be this generation's Björk. And with Lux, I think she might be there, frankly. So I want to talk about that down the line. That's going to be a fascinating thing. There's a new collaborative album with Chat Pile and Hayden Pedigo, which, like,
I knew that was coming out
what?
for months and it just wouldn't fit on our docket.
Yeah, like that's also just an absolutely fucking crazy pull there. So we have been drowning in new great releases this week, but we are going to be talking about two that have certainly been on our respective minds and respective radars. The first album we're going to be talking about is the new album from UK hardcore mathcore band Pupil
Pupil
Slicer.
slicer.
I have been an intense champion of this band because of their previous record, namely 2023's Blossom, which was just barely not my album of the year in 2023. If Sufjan Stevens did not descend from the gay music heavens and bestow upon us the glorious masterwork that is Javelin, that would have been my favorite album of the year. But that just because it didn't take that spot, do not assume that that is because my opinion of it diminished in any way. Blossom is, in my opinion, the absolute best mathcore album I have ever listened to. It is expansive, it's conceptual, it's exciting, it is always throwing you for a loop. It is melding genres that nobody else is melding together, and with a confidence and a an acumen, especially production wise, but like everything about this band is incredibly unique from top to bottom. I mean, like, you already don't get a huge presence of women in hardcore music and heavy music like this. You get an even fewer slice that is trans women. And the fact that they are a full-fledged mathcore act, that alone, you kind of have to be incredibly good musicians to even be a bad mathcore band. So it kind of demands a certain level of quality of you. But Blossom is an incredible album, and their debut record, Mirrors, is a great slice of more traditional Converge adjacent mathcore. So I was naturally looking forward to their next album, which was announced earlier this year. And they dropped a single for this new album, Fleshwork, which is another really solid effort from this band that goes into a lot of sort of fringe influences that they have had in the past, but have not fully quite explored. The sound of Blossom was a lot cleaner, a lot denser, a lot more far reaching. I would say Fleshwork is a lot more insular and it's a lot more focused of an album. It is way less concerned with whipping you around. It's way less concerned with a kind of dense conceptuality, and it goes for something a bit more concentrated. This is a sludge metal album, which
Mm.
definitely showed up in parts on Blossom, but again, that production style, it wasn't really trying to emphasize the same things that Fleshwork here is. This is very much in the vein of bands like Godflesh, for instance, where it's like the strangled mixes of this are really dense, really chunky sounding kind of stuff, but there is also a brightness to a lot of the instrumentation and a lot of the guitars on here that show you that just because they're going to lean more heavily into one sound doesn't going like that's not going to necessarily mean that they are sacrificing their inventiveness, because there is still plenty of mathcore on here and more hardcore sensibilities, and a lot of more like dense atmospheric stuff being done with these mixes that lets you know that they are still kind of a lot more wide reaching than a lot of similar bands in their ilk are. But to me, this is another really solid piece from their discography that is focused way more on singular impact, and its less frenzied approach to writing gives it a lot of consistency that lets me appreciate the pen on display in ways that I think are really direct and really invite in new listeners in many respects. As much as I love and adore Blossom, I think that that's probably like the albums on either side of it are probably way better to approach if you are trying to get into this band because they will overwhelm you a little less. In fact, Fleshwork here is more focused to the point where if you were going to get into this band, I would actually start here, and it kind of ingratiates you into a wilder, wider world of sound that is just a little bit easier to decode on something like this. And there's lots of themes that weren't out of place on the previous albums about identity, and specifically like identity within the context of modern society and the difficulties therein. So, Jen, I don't even like. I'm guessing that this is probably the first
Let
encounter you've
me,
ever had with mathcore, if even
yeah,
though
let
it's
me
not
take it.
full-fledged.
Let me take it. But yeah, the first thing that I was going to ask you is that I remember you asked me on a previous episode, have you ever listened to mathcore? And I said no. But I was going to
Hmm.
ask you, like, does this count? To be very
It's
reductive about it, because this is very sludgy. And honestly,
yes.
listening to this album gave me a lot of the same feelings that I got. In particular, I listened to this album and I feel the very similar feelings that I felt about Laugh Tracks, the Not Loose
Mm.
album.
Hmm.
Because you got to understand, I'm still a little bit of a baby when it comes to metal. And so
It happens.
I'm looking for what I know. And not that these two albums are entirely comparable to each other, but Laugh Tracks is where I found the most kinship when thinking about the discography of Not Loose and listening to this. And I just loved the jammy tempo that a lot of this album provides. It
Hmm.
feels like what's the one King Gizzard album is a bad question, but what's the Omnium whatever the fuck that has the
Omnium
one song on
Gatherum,
it? That's the one. The one song on it that's like 15 minutes long. This whole
Dripping
album
Tap.
reminds me of, yeah, the Dripping Tap from that King Gizzard record, where it's very jammy and it's very sludgy. And that's not what I expected because I knew this
Hmm.
was a mathcore band. I'd heard about Blossom because you had been hyping it up. But then as soon as we get to Heather, the first track, it immediately kind of kicks this jam sense of pace into motion. And you're right in also saying that the pen is very forward on this album, which you might not
Hmm.
expect. And even, the tempo and the pen contrast each other in really important ways. The moment where I realized, like, oh, this album is really trying to do something with putting its writing forward,
Hmm.
which there's a moment on the first track where there's a couplet where we love you and then it can't be true. And those two lines are so drawn out. The musical scope completely changes as this kind of emotional crux comes into form. And so, like, yes, this is a very jammy, this is a very sludgy album. This is an album that has fits and starts, like the second track, Accordion, has a moment where it very much kicks into gear, which is not at all what I expected out of a band that you've readily described as like the best mathcore in the whole wide world. So I just want to know, like, you've kind of been marketing this to people that don't know what the band is,
Hmm.
but as far as you go, as somebody who really loves Blossom, how does this compare is a bad question, but where does it fit with what you get out of Blossom?
The best way to kind of differentiate mathcore from metalcore is that metalcore is about as heavy as you can get while still following the rules. Mathcore is as heavy as you get when you start breaking the rules. It's about time signature switch ups and breakdowns and just like obeying as little musical convention as humanly possible. And so the reason I view Blossom as kind of the peak of the genre is because that album, again, is it's like it's for every bit as much as it is, yeah, it is a mathcore album, but it is also a progressive metal album. There is shoegaze on that album. There's black gaze. There is thrash metal breakdowns. It is an album that is constantly restless. Whereas this is an album that feels like it revels in itself a little bit more, and its sort of shifting musical tempos and pace is a little bit scaled back. And there is mathcore elements here. There is, that like wild, wacky time signature, breakdowns and shit, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's way more focused on kind of revving rather than throttling. It's way more like it's an album that you're kind of supposed to sit within rather than be, ushered by. Like that's an album that I listen to and I need to move while I listen to it. Whereas I listen to this and it's like I want to let it like seep into me. There's kind of an atmospheric quality to this record that is very, I mean, it's in keeping with lots of sludge metal bands like Cult of Luna or Neurosis, for instance, of which this reminded me of a lot. But in pairing with the sort of really frenzied vocal style of the front person of this band, who I think is like a really, really singular presence in the world of modern heavy music and hardcore, like that sort of her British accent is like really thick, but like there's something ineffable about it, the way that it sounds and the way that she's able to push all of the melodrama in her body into the delivery of these words that makes them way more cogent than bands like this often are. Like you're able to really appreciate, again, the fact that this is an album that's really focusing on the idea of, flesh work. So there's the idea of like self-mutilation on here and trying to understand yourself through the pain that you inflict upon yourself in response to the world. Like that's another difference that I really appreciate about this is because again, Blossom is this like dense conceptual sci-fi concept album that is really just more or less an excuse to elliptically explore a person's psyche. This is more very emotionally direct, and I think that the writing is tailored to that very strongly. I was able to feel and get on the wavelength of this record more easily than I was able to initially with Blossom, because Blossom's an album you kind of have to wrap your head around. This, on the other hand, is a bit more immediate. It's a bit more easily understandable. There's a tangible despair in the vocals on here that is, again, it's really melodramatic. I can't stress enough that Kate Davies is like just has this sense about her where like her performances actually remind me of like Kristen Hayter, somebody whose command of their voice is so theatrical that even if you don't get the exact tone or meaning of the lyrics the first time, you know how you're meant to feel just by the pain that her voice is able to sort of summon within it. So it's just it's a band that is capable of basically everything in the kitchen sink, choosing to focus on something and do it about as well as anybody does. Like I think that this is one of the more consistent and solid metal releases of this year. And I'm glad that Pupil Slicer are doing this in such a way that lets you know that like they're still very multi-talented, but they have facets that they're still not like they haven't fully explored yet. Like, their potential has not run out. Like their next album could be something that's completely different than like basically they're just taking different parts of Blossom and then expanding these ideas. And if this is the first step in that phase of what they're doing, it's really confident and really, really like unique for this world. Like the production on display, you got to walk a fine line with stuff like this because sometimes it can just be too dense and too suffocating to appreciate the subtleties of. I don't really ever have that problem on here because there's a lot of sort of instrumental clashes. And again, some of the guitars on here are so bright. Some of the gang vocal swells are so big and so satisfying that there's lots of dynamic things happening in these mixes, even if they're like just so filled out. Like this is an album that, yeah, it's less than 40 minutes, but it feels like you listened to an epic by the time you're finished with it because it's punishing.
And even when you're like me, when you're a fucking second grader when it comes to metal music, you're gonna get a lot out of this one because I definitely did. I found a lot of catharsis in a lot of the big grandiose movements that some of these songs have. Like on Black Scrawl, there's a moment where the tonality of the drums kind of changes. They sound a little bit more metallic, and there's these really plucky guitar hits that are so good. And then the build in between the title track Fleshwork and White Noise, where it gets into this really, really, really groovy place. Really groovy
Hmm.
for a grungy, kind of sludgy
Those bent
song.
guitars it sounds
Yeah.
rich.
And that, White Noise is my favorite track on this album because it really gets at this. A thing that we talked about the last episode was about music about being present in a kind of new world, and White
Hmm.
Noise evokes that for me in particular because White Noise for me is all about this inability to feel presence and this
Yep.
kind of constant barrage of external stimuli, this surrounding muck that drowns out any real attempts to be a real person. And I
I was
know
never
that
meant
this
to
is a
have this
Jake,
knowledge. I was never meant to have this knowledge.
I know that this is a Jake core album because who do you think that the first track is actually named after?
Heather Langenkamp?
Heather Mason.
And there is there, you know what? First of
I
all,
got you.
I 100% believe it because the album cover is like that's the color combination of Silent Hill 3 is the kind of like burnt amber of orange fire, and there is a moment on the album like I'm pretty sure it's actually I think it might be the end of Heather where they have the I hope this hurts moment.
That's
The
on
last album,
no, because I wrote it down. I know where it is. That's on
or is that
blah, 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 blah.
Innocence?
That's on Sacrosanct.
Oh, Sacrosanct. Okay.
But yeah,
Well,
that
it's
is
that
also
moment
that's a mouthwashing reference, which again,
on, yeah,
big Jake album moment
on
we're
the
having
last
right now.
album they referenced The Outer Wilds, which was a Riley ass game, and on this, of course, they are referencing Mouthwashing and Silent Hill 3. So it's very like that's the kind of temperament that I feel like it has. Like Blossom is an album about like it's like seeing your like every version of yourself in a crazy kaleidoscope, whereas this is an album where you can only see the version of yourself that you are and all of the things about yourself that you hate. And that the way that these albums attack these ideas using their kind of sound palette, I think is perfect for like it's engineered to emotionally make sense without even the context of the lyricism at play. But like there's still moments where there are songs like Innocence, for example, where like the chanted gang vocals at the end just really give this feeling of like attempted just sort of insurrection to just fight back, to just like to claw at any just sort of like oppressive force that's holding you down, whether it be, just like a general like a sense of ennui or depression or like literal actual, bodies and institutions that might be keeping you down.
It has a kind of dangerous sense of propulsion to it,
Yeah,
where the album is kind of always moving forward in a way that strengthens the concept of being uncertain about, your place in the world, but the world keeps turning. It's a very grandiose portrait of feeling stuck.
absolutely. Wonderful way of putting it. The appeal of this album is a lot more like you will probably dig this if you dug the last two records, but its simple pleasures are a bit more immediate, and I think it's a worthwhile addition to them proving that mathcore is like just because it is this angry, thrashy, nonsensical genre, like there is still so many interesting, colorful places that you can take it by melding it with different heavy music. And as far as I'm concerned, this continues them holding the modern torch for that. Like I really feel like they are kind of the best band doing this kind of thing right now. And I mean, that's no small feat considering we've got people like Better Lovers, for instance, who are making really great mathcore right now. We've got the Callous Dow Boys are also making really interesting, fun
I love the last Callous
mathcore.
Cowboys album. Holy
What
shit,
now?
that was great. I loved the last Callous Cowboys album.
See, like it's a genre that like that's the reason I love it so much is that it births bands like that who are just like so intensely unserious, but also like they're so talented and nothing sounds like them and they don't take themselves seriously enough to obey the rules. They just there is a sense of freedom that mathcore has where it's just like, nah, man, fuck everything. We don't if we want to do something here, we'll do it. Are we gonna throw an IDM track in the middle of this album? Sure, man. Why not? I don't fucking care. That's the kind of shit that this genre is built for. And Pupil Slicer, they're leading the charge. So
I'm gonna be following this band for the rest of their career because I really loved this record a whole lot. So big
thumbs
thumbs up to
up
Pupil Slicer.
now.
Now I want to stake. This is my time. I get to cash my check because okay, so we're talking about Danny Brown's new album Stardust. And
Yep.
I said all the way back in the top MCs video when we talked about Danny Brown, I said, you know, it's really interesting that Danny
Mm-hmm.
Brown is
You
working with
sure
all
did.
these EDM artists in a very online space, all these really young people making great EDM. And I wonder if that's going to feed into what his next project is.
I wonder.
I wonder. And so, me being the not singles listening to person that I am, as soon as I put on the Book of Daniel and I see the track list, I see all the featured artists on this, I just knew I'm cashing my
Oh,
check,
he done
baby,
did it. He
because
did it.
I did it. I called it. I'm staking it. This was me. I did it. No.
You
Okay, so we're talking about
manifested it.
Stardust. We are both really big fans of Danny Brown. This show
Huge.
is a very Danny Brown positive show.
Hmm. And
And
how could it not be?
how could it not be, right? Danny Brown is really one of the most underrated rappers in the space, where he feels like he could go nuclear at any moment, and somebody who should be the catalyst to make that happen, whether it's some guy who works at a radio station or whatever, just keeps like missing the beat. And it's fine. It's fine. It's fine because I love Danny Brown so much. And you and I both are really big fans of his last project, Quaranta, which
Hmm.
went through a very difficult process because Quaranta was sitting on a shelf for like 2 years and just didn't
Hmm.
come out because he was having difficulties with his label. He was
Many
working on
such
Scaring the
cases.
Hose. And so I presume that him getting some creative inspiration and momentum off of Scaring the Hose made that
Hmm.
process even worse because then, of course,
Probably.
the label is like, well, how do we put out a Danny Brown album at the same time that a Danny Brown album is coming out and is becoming one of the biggest albums of the year in the space. And Scaring the Hose, for my many mixed feelings about it, I'm largely very positive on that album at the end of the
I
day.
think we're both in very similar places with that in that like we are kind of not we're not quite antis or anything on that, but we like it a lot. We just have a couple reservations about it that keep us back from the unanimous rapturous kind of response that it got.
I will say the Scare and the Hose director's cut that adds a couple of new tracks and also sequences in a couple of the tracks from the DLC pack EP makes the sequencing and the listening experience of that album a little bit better. So check
I
that
still
out if you
haven't
haven't already,
checked that
because
out,
that
so
just
I
came out a
will.
few weeks ago.
Okay, fair enough.
But Stardust was, for people that haven't been paying attention, unlike me, a surprising change in direction for Danny Brown because Quaranta is a very downbeat and a very
I
retrospective,
mean, let's call it what
introspective
it
album.
is. That's a hip hop maturation album. Danny beat everyone to that particular trend. He did it, he just like couldn't release it at the time he had finished it. But like the
Right.
quarantine, maturation, I'm older, here's my imparted wisdom to the next generation album. Danny did that first. He technically beat people like Kendrick to that.
God, yeah, if that had come out on time, he would have beat Kendrick to Mr. Morale.
And like
Wow.
we had Earl do it this year, we had Tyler did it last year. Like again, there are many cases of this exact type of record. And I think that looking at that in the context of Quaranta and Stardust is interesting because while Quaranta definitely still is that, it's almost like this is also a hip hop maturation album. It's like a part two or a coda almost.
It is in very many ways because I mean you look at the opening track, Book of Daniel. I mean really if you look at the bookends, right?
Hmm.
If you look at the Book of Daniel and then the last two tracks especially. This is in a very similar means that God Does Like Ugly operates. It is an album that came out of Danny becoming a different person than he was before
Hmm.
because Danny on Quaranta talked a whole lot about his struggles with addiction, which again comes up a lot on this. He talks about his struggles in the business, which comes up a little bit on this. But man, as soon as you hear those choir organs and then that
Ooh.
plucky electric guitar on the Book of Daniel, you know you're just in for something a little bit discordant. Not just for a hip hop album, but in kind of in general. You're getting
Mm.
something a little bit unconventional, even in the EDM space, which I would argue that this album could birth a new subgenre of dance music, of digicore, where because Danny, here's the thing, is that Danny is a guy that's all about syllables in the same way that
That's
Aesop
true.
Rock is very much about syllables. And you
Hmm.
don't get that sort of thing in a lot of the mainstream EDM stuff. And so I want to see people like chase what this album is doing, where Danny is rapping the same way that he's always rapped, but these EDM constructions are built around that foundation. I think the best example of this is on I Love My Life, where Danny is rapping at breakbeat tempo before the breakbeat
Yep.
even comes into the mix. And so you feel
It
like the
catches up with
breakbeat
him.
yeah, exactly. The breakbeat is chasing his tempo, not the other way around. And I love that energy, right? Because I love Danny as a vocalist. And this is maybe my favorite album of Danny Brown as a vocalist, even though it's not his widest range that he's ever had on a record. The variety of the kinds of beats that he's riding make his vocals just stand out so much more. You've got a peak house apex at one moment in this album with Lift Me Up, where he's using, I mean,
God.
this sounds like it should go right back on Scaring the Hose, honestly.
This,
Because my
like
favorite
this is
track
an
on Scaring the
instrumental
Hose,
that has like a Vogue element to it. Like the
yes,
vocal presence on here sounds
yes.
like Madonna on fucking Vogue, and it's lit. This song rocks.
Right. It's not just house. It is Paris is Burning. Like it is the
Hmm.
catwalk.
Yeah, yeah,
Somebody would
definitely.
walk down the catwalk to Lift Me Up by Danny Brown. I want to see that happen.
100%. 100%.
You're always gonna get what you know you love about Danny Brown, which is these
Hmm.
fast flows, these insanely funny one-liners, and these beats that are just kind of chasing his momentum. And the best thing about this album, the best thing about it, is there's so many songs on here that I was surprised that they kept going. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Yeah.
There are so many songs on this where I get to a certain point and I think the song is over, and then I check my phone and I think, wait a second, there's 2 minutes left. What's gonna happen? Because we talked
Yep.
about the beat switch a little bit again with God Does Like Ugly, but I'm telling you, the beat switch on Starburst is the best of the whole year. Once you get that little vocal sample,
Dog.
that little sped up vocal sample, of like, I'm gonna jump. Yeah!
Oh my God. Upon hearing Starburst and hearing Danny Brown essentially rap to a Sophie beat, I was like, oh my God. It's the fulfillment of the potential of, yeah, right. by Vince Staples. We've picked up where that torch left off.
I was
And
reading an
Danny,
interview in Billboard where he talked about that specifically. He
really.
literally said, I made Stardust because I didn't work with Sophie.
And you know what? That makes complete sense. I know that this is not necessarily like the best way to like interact with something like before you actually like listen to it, but I cannot help it. I like to gauge the climate a little bit. I was like, before I listened to this, I went to Rate Your Music because Danny is a very Rate Your Music inclined artist, and I was like, what are people saying about this? And I was very shocked to see that it was very divisive. Like being received well, but there is a notable fracture happening within Danny Brown's base. And I was wondering, like, initially seeing that, I was just kind of like, damn, what exactly is happening so that people aren't really a fan of it? And it's not necessarily that I feel like, people are like varying levels of interested in this album or the execution is here or there. It's more that Danny Brown's place in hip hop has been as a very kind of strange version of a rapper's rapper. Like Danny
Mm.
Brown, people talk about Danny Brown now the way that people talked about mixtape era Lil Wayne. When they say that it's basically a meme that like they were like Lil Wayne can rap on anything. And for a while that was true. That's what they say about Danny now is that Danny can rap on anything. And that kind of versatility, like it lets you get in with the fact that like Danny, underneath his kind of higher pitched yelpy delivery, he is one of the most technically gifted rappers alive right now, if not just the flat out and out most like gifted in terms of what the versatility of his voice is able to do. And one of the reasons I love Quaranta so much is because he gets to kind of rein himself in and prove that he is more fundamentally solid than maybe a lot of people gave him credit for, because he became so big off the back of albums like Atrocity Exhibition, which is an album where he's just losing his mind constantly. Like that's an album that again, it sounds like the drugs that was, that he consumed while making it. And so you have this instance now of Danny getting clean after having a really hard time and like not being able to do a lot of live shows in the past and stuff, both because of
Yeah,
his
like
health and
I
because
went
of
to the Scare
COVID.
and the Hose tour. I was at like the second show, but that
Hmm.
whole tour got postponed because he went to rehab right when they were supposed to, right when the album dropped. Like a
And
week later, the news came out that they checked himself into rehab.
I remember that really kind of putting a damper on things because it's just like you kind of wanted him to enjoy this renewed success, because I think that because Danny has cultivated such a big swath of people who are very much old, have the old hip hop head sensibilities, that that's why I think we could credibly argue every Danny Brown album since Atrocity Exhibition has been underrated, including this one, I would think.
Yeah,
Be
I would go so far as to say that.
because you kind of have him, it's like you have people going to him for a very specific thing. And it's why upon listening to Stardust, where at the end I was like, okay, not only do I think that this might be like maybe the second best Danny Brown album out and out, at least in
I'm
my
with you. I
opinion.
think I'm with
Okay,
you.
thank you. I didn't want to like come out the gate swinging
No,
that
I
hard,
think
but
I'm with you.
here's is because the ethos of this album to me is this is final form Danny Brown. A lot of the times when artists get clean, they'll have a moment where they get clarity and they try and recenter themselves and do something that's fundamental that, reminds people that they can still do what they do, but, leans on established strengths. This is the opposite of that, where Danny says, no, 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 no. All this fringe weird shit that I've always been into, I'm going to do all of the risky shit. And first of all, that's just the most Danny Brown-esque thing to do, is that this guy has been a relentless creative innovator since he came onto the scene. And I feel like this continues in that spirit of just like he makes music for himself, and nothing makes that more obvious than the actual text of this album. But in a way that feels gratifying, is that this is like, regardless of whether you like it or not, this is the album of somebody who has a very distinct and very identifiable creative vision. This is the result of clarity. And I know that like I'm pretty sure the biggest like the top review on Rate Your Music at the time when I was like reading on it was literally like even Danny Brown can't make me like hyperpop. And that's the schism of the album. That's why some people are breaking off is
Yeah,
because
I didn't bring
these
up
old
hyperpop when thinking about this, but I mean, yeah, hyperpop was the space that he was kind of running in those months in between Quaranta and this, when he was probably working on putting this album together in the meantime, because you got like Frost Children, Jane Remover,
Quedeca
Quadica,
underscores.
all people he worked with, featured on records with, in between Quaranta actually releasing and this album coming out. So yeah, even though Quaranta should have come out a lot earlier, this kind of period in between, I was watching like a hawk because
Yeah, no, and
anytime
you
Danny
nailed
Brown
it.
popped up on a feature, I just thought, what is he doing? Like, what is this building to?
And
And this is it. This is what
well,
it builded to.
and if you pay attention, like this all finds its inception to me in 2013 when Danny drops Old. Old's not an album that everybody still remembers or talks about. It's kind of like the hybrid in that people don't really talk about it as a Danny Brown album all that often. But you go back and you listen to Old, and it's literally Danny rapping over EDM beats. They are a little bit more dated, they're a little bit more of the time, but it's like that album sounds like a guy trying to rap over rough drafts that would become Charlie XCX's Brat. That's more or less what it is. And it's a bit more straight-laced about it. It's a lot less frenzied and jagged and weird than this album is. But now that Danny has his head on straight a little bit more, he's able to revisit the ideas that he definitely had on Old, and he's blending his present self with it in a way and with a genre and with a scene that makes way more sense. Like, I mean, the first track, the Book of Daniel, this is just a gorgeous pop song. Quadica comes in here and is like has these Brian Wilson-esque vocal
This
harmonies
like
in the
piano,
background.
this piano ballad, stadium rock chorus that he
Beautiful
brings
little
to it
plucked
puts the
Elliott
whole thing
Smith
together.
guitar. It's gorgeous, and it's like it's also like it brings that emotional edge Quaranta kind of had, but it's like you really get a sense of finality that Danny has arrived at a place where he is happier, where he is healthier, and like better yet, where he's just creatively driven. Book of Daniel is just like this is how difficult my life has been, but now I'm in a good place and I feel I can do this now. And then Starburst immediately after is like proof of concept that he's standing on business of this
It
idea
makes the
of
same
Danny
move
Brown
that
and
Quaranta
EDM.
does, where like Quaranta has the singular all-out banger that is Tantor as
Tantor,
its second track
which
that is again the proof of concept for that album, which is like you can't be
did
40 still doing this shit. Well, fuck you. Here's Tantor.
did
But
you know that that song's name was originally something different, but a bunch of songs on Quaranta were just named after what Danny named the beats and sent that name list to the label instead, and that's why it's called Tantor, is that he was just like, ah, it's kind of like an elephant stamping around. And Tantor is from the fucking like Tantor is like the name of an elephant in some Disney movie, I think, or whatever. But like, yeah, it's like, okay, I actually do kind of get what you mean here. But like the way that Danny is able to synthesize the fact that yes, he can rap over anything with his rather flexible delivery style, and he actually, I agree with you in terms of vocal performances on here, is that he's actually doing a lot like flexibly with his style. He's doing stuff on here that sounds a little bit more like clear-headed, like from you know what I'm saying, or Quaranta, for instance. There are moments where he's just completely fucking like out of his mind on shit like Starburst, and like I completely understand why there are a bunch of hip hop heads who listen to this and they're just like, nah, man, this ain't for me. Is because this is just not a sound that is appealing to people like that, and thus that is the division. But that doesn't mean that Danny isn't doing this incredibly well. Like once, like from Starburst is a fucking rager. Like this song slams, and
I
then
can't believe that this
Copycats.
song is almost 6 minutes long.
Copycats is so fucking catchy. Like underscores on here, absolutely bring it. This is an amazing hook, and Danny is able to weave himself in and out of it so well. It's such a fun fucking song. And then you have shit that just like the aggression is turned up so high on shit like 1999, where the featured artist Janaskis, the vocals are just like it's just a cloud of noise on this song that
Yeah.
is just like ah, but like it's done within rhythm. It's done with a pace that's like, it kind of felt like this is sort of like I feel as though the last Travis Scott album, Utopia, really tried to blend a kind of hip hop and dance thing and didn't quite succeed in wholly making that a synthesized idea that I
Yeah.
feel like this album does like flawlessly. And there's also another thing I saw being as a potential point of contention is that there are bits of spoken word that are throughout this album that honestly I
I'm
don't
charmed.
mind.
I'm
I
charmed by all of them.
this album's blinding sincerity is always going to be something that's going to get along with me, like because so much of it is about self-improvement and stability and the work that you have to put in to become a more well-realized person. Again, very Mr. Morale in that respect. And Danny is no less crazy of a lyricist, but he is also still like thoughtful and doing shit that I feel like is genuinely inspiring as a creative. Like he jokes at the start of like a Book of Daniel, he's like, yeah, I'm in the big three, and I'm just like, let's put aside the
Take a
financial.
take a beat, Danny.
Let's
Hold on,
well, that's
hold
the
on
thing.
now.
Let's put aside the financial element of the big three, and let's think about this for a minute. Danny Brown, after getting the push of Scaring the Hose, which kind of became its own form of mainstream, even though like Scare in the Hose is like it's kind of a dog whistle for old school hip hop fans because Scare in the
The
Hose
album Scare and
music.
the Hose kind of has its own subculture revolving around
Yes.
it that is completely
And
different from than anything going on in the space.
and it feels as though Danny is was already so beloved and was kind of brought to a new echelon by that to the point where it's like, I don't know, man. These days, if you're not talking about units sold, if you want to say Danny Brown's in the modern big three when it comes to catalog, when it comes to skill, when it comes to lyricism, when it comes to storytelling, when it comes to experimentation, I mean, if you look at it in its totality, I kind of think it's ridiculous to not consider the dude in the top five. Like
Well, yeah, the big three is a populist
it's a
concept, and so
construct, so it doesn't.
now that Drake is out, who is in? I know it's not
Mhm.
Danny Brown if I go talk to some rando on the street, but
But if
he
you're a
can
hip
make
hop
that
head,
claim, and I
mhm,
would believe it.
it's more. I feel as though, and again, this album is almost like him proving that it's like, yeah, I'm talented enough to be in consideration. Here's me rapping over EDM, and I mean, like there are moments where this gets so abrasive and loud and noisy that it genuinely does feel like I'm just like, oh, is this what people who like Playboy Cardi, is this what they hear? Because it kind of feels like that's where I'm at with this because like I mean, for as long as this album is, it's 50 minutes, got 14 songs. I don't think this album drops it. Like I think that I like the song Green Light. I just don't think it's one of the best points on the album, and I think
I
something
agree.
similar about Baby, I think is just like it's good, but I feel like Underscores did what they did much better the first time they were on the album. But like Danny as a singular performer and these crazy as fuck instrumentals that are all taking from different sects of pop music and dance music and all of this stuff. It's just like how like this year has been incredible specifically for hip hop and dance music. And at the end of it, Danny Brown just decided to be like, I will make one of the best in both. And like, yeah, like
Who am I to tell him that he didn't?
this
Like,
is an album that is a blast. Like I don't think it's as good as Atrocity Exhibition. Like and that's an album that I mean again, I don't think that a lot of albums are as good as Atrocity Exhibition, but it's an album that suits a completely different purpose, has a totally different tenor. Like, I don't go to listen to Atrocity Exhibition to like have fun. I would listen to Stardust to have fucking fun because it's filled with joy and just an overwhelming love for the idea of the creative spirit. There is nobody doing this who just embodies the desire to create and to just be yourself, and like with it is a rejection of cringe. It is a rejection of being self-critical, and it is an
Just
embrace
remember that
of,
you're goated. Remember
yeah,
that you're
that's,
goated.
and you know what? Like, to be an artist in this day and age, yeah, man, dude, believe what you gotta believe to make your shit. And if you get to a point where you're Danny and you can do something like this, like the joy coming off of him of getting clean and making the music that he's always wanted to make and that has always been within his career. It's just been viewed as a moment that people haven't liked as much, so that when he's revisiting the idea, people are like, I don't know about this, but like, no, it's been there for more than 10 years. He's just finally in a place where, his life isn't impeding him. So it's a really awesome full circle moment of just like, I've been paying attention to Danny Brown for like almost 9 years at this point, and it feels like he is at his personal and creative peak. And like, I get this not being your bag, but for what this is, I feel like this could potentially, like, it's like you said, I feel like this could be the new standard for a new subgenre of hip hop that, I mean, feels like we're already there with how much dance music is being incorporated into stuff. Like the entire rage movement of hip hop, that's dance music adjacent. It totally is. It already is. But this feels like the Sergeant Pepper of that. Like everything should copy this from now on
Right.
if they want to
It's a more
do
formal
this.
attempt. It's a more formal attempt to say, like, yeah, we can put dance music and make that the backbone for great hip hop, where
Well,
Rage kind of stumbles into that area, but this album
this is with
Stardust goes
intent.
there on purpose. Yeah.
Yes. And well, I mean, and think about it too. How did hip hop begin? It began as disco. It's literally full circle of Danny making hip hop about dancing again. So honestly, it's like the truest, hip hop release of the year. That's the if I was making a title for just this like segment, if I did like a clickbaity thing, it would be like Final Form Danny Brown releases the only true hip hop album of 2025.
No, but I feel it. I'm with you. Like I want this to be a prototype for a new like school of hip hop because I love this sound so much. And he put together a lot of great people to make this album happen, which we shouldn't discount. And so I hope that
Yeah, the
that spirit,
collaborators here are key. They are.
there's a lot of collaborators here, more than have been on any individual Danny Brown album. And so I can't wait to see
Danny
like
and
where this
Quadeca need to make a
goes.
full collab because like
Ah, could you
Quadeca's
imagine?
just like his instrumentals for Danny are, it's like he knows that his voice is on the more abrasive side, so he makes these beats for Danny that he rides so perfectly that I'm just like, dude, like who would even think of this? This is insane. Like I need a full project from them because
Both
nothing
of
would
their
sound like it.
collaborations, both of their tracks on this really give the spectrum of a potential full collaboration between them.
Yeah,
So
it's
we,
this
we've
is
hedged a lot of our bets of like, oh, what if these guys made a whole album together? But this could be really good.
I mean, like, and Danny's not showing signs of stopping. I was watching an interview with him just last night where he was like, "Nah, man, I want to at least do like three more albums before I'm 50." And I'm just like, man, that's
Please.
admirable, and I hope so because I would love them all, I'm sure. Like nobody is doing it like Danny Brown is doing it, and I would argue that nobody is doing it as well in many respects like at all. This is one of the best hip hop albums of the year and one of the best dance albums of the year where we haven't been short on either.
All right. big thumbs up on Stardust. Man, this album of the year video is gonna be hard. I'm gonna have to kill some
Oh yeah.
darlings, man. I'm gonna have
Oh
to
yeah.
kill some darlings for this album of the year video. But speaking of darlings that I won't have to kill because they're not darlings at all, Jake. So your choice for me was the only anime that I've ever heard you claim that you could not finish, which
That's
is
steep claim. I finished some bad shit.
we finished Elfen Lied, you asshole.
And like, I was never going to imply that this is Elfen Lied levels of bad because it's flatly not. But the reason
So
I
what is it?
recommended,
Don't get on a thing. What is it?
yeah,
Can we say what it
the,
is first?
the reason I recommended you Supernatural, the animation, literally the anime, produced by Studio Madhouse. The second thing from Studio Madhouse we've talked about here, the other being Full Metal Alchemist, which,
What?
yeah, skew that for a
What?
moment. It's the same studio.
That
Uh,
actually makes some things about the show make sense. But anyway, go on.
Well, okay, so the reason I recommended this to you is because Supernatural itself is like the linchpin of basically a ton of shit that we have talked about being interested in on this show of like episodic Monster of the Week style television formats, Southern Gothic media, horror, just like the idea of pulp fiction and storytelling and just like adaptations and choices one can make and the idea of changing something from live action to animation, like it felt like the final form of every kind of thing we've talked about so far on the show. So I thought it was only fitting that I save it to talk about with you, just because from what I had remembered, I was like, I remember it being not good, but I remember it being not good for a lot of very specific and very strange reasons. And that's what I wanted to talk about mainly. And when I didn't revisit all of this, but the segments of it that I did revisit, it's very strange when something is bad in a way you could not recognize when you initially watched it. But like I remembered this show being one thing, and then I rewatched it, and it wasn't better or worse than I remembered. I was just like, God, this is so fucking weird. And not to mention, 2 years ago, my fiance, like the two of us, if you wondered, it's like you knew we were Tumblr people because of the everything about us. If you knew how we got into Tumblr, yeah, we were in the super of the super Hulock trifecta. So Rhiannon and I, over the course of basically 2 years, watched all 15 seasons of Supernatural. So now I'm kind of
God.
like I'm joined at the hip and I have many very strong opinions about that show, but I always thought this would be an interesting thing to talk about because it mainly adapts, well, it is just kind of an adaptation of the first season, but like to me, if I can speak kind of fondly about it, the first 5 seasons of Supernatural, I like them very much for what they are as that kind of, again, prototype CW, very like within the lineage of shows like The X-Files, but also shows like Charmed, sort of the meeting point of where those two things are. That's where Supernatural is. And as like a Monster of the Week kind of thing, like I think the beginning of Supernatural and where it was supposed to end, I think that's a pretty good story. Like that, you just take those 5 seasons and you have that one dramatic reversal of you have the dynamic of the brothers, and then one has to save the other, but then you pull the catch 22 and have the other save the one and have the sacrifice being made. It's like it's a good, nice, complete story about two guys who are in a family of demon hunters and hunt demons. That's the sort of broad encapsulation of Supernatural. But Jen, what's your history with this show? Because I know you have seen a little bit of it. I know we have mentioned it before, but like explicitly, like have you? I'm sure you haven't seen all God, what are there like fucking 300 episodes of that fucking show? It's 15 seasons
Yeah, let's
long.
go. Okay, so I put the Hulock and Super Hulock in high school. Um, I wasn't on Tumblr. I just liked the shows, and I had friends who liked the shows who were on Tumblr. Uh,
I
kind of
I
what I
I
said last episode
was
about being a theater kid, of like I was a theater kid polyglot, which made me not as
See,
embarrassing of a
this is
person.
the way in which we're different, is that you were more the theater kid, I was more the Tumblr kid, even though spiritually we were both.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But when I was watching, I basically replaced Supernatural in the trifecta with Smallville at that time in my life.
Yeah, I did. I had Smallville first and then graduated to Supernatural.
Right, but I just had Smallville because I thought that
Yeah.
was a better idea. But I had watched a handful of episodes sporadically throughout the year, just like by hanging out with my friends, by meeting random people in college, da 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 da. But I never watched any of the first season of
Hmm.
Supernatural. So this was an entirely new experience for me. So I did a little bit of an experiment. I watched the first episode of the anime, and then I went
Interesting.
and then I went and watched the pilot of the actual show. And then I th realized that continuing this back and forth pace would, one, not only triple my workload, but two, be a completely fruitless effort for comparison. Because the pilot of Supernatural, because it is actually a pilot back when those were a thing that existed. And so it has, pilots have a specific kind of grammar to them. The first episode of this anime is not like that at all. In
Nope.
fact, I'm just gonna go ahead and stake my like big, nail in the coffin claim that the biggest mistake that this anime makes is that it ditches the structure of the original show to completely
The
come after
inverse
Cowboy
of the Cowboy
Bebop's
Bebop
nachos.
problem. Yeah, it's the inverse problem where it's
Not
like
just not
instead of
just that like not just that the production model is ripping off what happened with Cowboy Bebop live action, but because this show is riffing on Cowboy Bebop in a lot of respects, I would argue.
also very much suffers from the fact that the very tight structure of these stories, changing the amount of time either way, is going to yield issues. So when Cowboy Bebop stretched itself too thin by having longer episodes, this, on the other hand, feels like it has to strangle the story into itself of these 20-minute long episodes.
Yeah, so for a layman like me, even though I didn't get too far into the first season of Supernatural, I can of the actual show, I can tell you what it's about, which is you have these two brothers who, when they were young, their mother was killed by a mystery force. Something happened that
Demon with
is,
yellow eyes.
well, we don't even get that from the pilot. That's where
Mm.
I'm going off of. Mother died under mysterious circumstances. One brother goes off to help the dad hunt monsters all across the country. The other one wants a normal life and is off at college. The show starts with the dad having disappeared on a hunt that he went on solo. So the brothers reunite because Dean pulls Sam back in to try to find their dad. And that's the premise of the whole first season of the show. And they go on all these Monster of the Week antics while chasing their dad's trail, basically.
Hmm.
Great premise for a show. I
Yeah, real
love the first
solid.
episode. I watched three or four of the first episode of the first season of Supernatural. Loved all of them. Just didn't have time to watch all that stuff
Yeah,
before we before we recorded this.
yeah, and perfectly
There's a
acceptable.
one of the episodes has a baby Alden Ehrenreich in it, which was so cute. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, I remember seeing a lot of
he's
people in
so
that
cute,
show.
dude. And Jeffrey Dean Morgan looks so normal in this
It's
television show.
it's wild seeing like a lot of character actors just in their default state in this. I am actually I'm actually quite a big fan specifically of just the character and performance of Dean Winchester in particular. Like he's just a
Oh yeah,
very
there's a
like
magnetism to Ackles, man. Like as soon as he pulls up on the scene,
he's also just he's really hot. He's really really hot. I can't even
we can
like
say it. He's
Yeah,
26. We can say it.
like I feel so bad for Jared Padalecki because it's just like by comparison, it's like he's not an ugly guy, but it's just like being stuck next to that fucking smoke show for 15 years. That's got to do something to your ego. So,
I just like there's something about that moment in the pilot episode where they're in the motel room and he's walking in and he's just covered in mud except for
mhm.
his eyes and his mouth and he just looks at Dean and he just goes, "No chick flick moments."
He's got this intensity, but Ackles also plays him as being like just aloof enough. He's very much a like of the things about Supernatural that
He's
actually
got
are
Spike
Southern.
Spiegel energy. That's the thing
He's
about Dean is that, at least in the episodes that
he's
I watched, he's got a little bit of Spike in him.
he's Spike Spiegel and John Constantine put into a blender, and that's why
Exactly.
he rocks. So
That's
like
perfect. That's a perfect call.
I'm it's the most Southern Gothic thing about Supernatural is the character of like just, and the idea of him being like the more tortured sibling who like had to go through more and like still didn't fully connect with his dad and has an odd relationship with his brother. He's also a womanizer. He's very charming, but he's also very sad. Like he's very classic archetype, very likable, very, puppy dog German shepherd, aw shucks kind of dude, but also he's kind of a demon killing badass. So, like Supernatural, the story of that show is basically that it was insanely successful to the point where it was like the idea of canceling or killing the show at any point was just totally written off because they were making too much money. So the first three seasons of Supernatural were supposed to be the for only three, and then it was to five, and then it just kind of kept going and
And then
going and
they
going
just
until they
kind of
did
decided
15.
that they weren't going to
And
stop.
and the thing with Supernatural is that it becomes like Stephen King's The Dark Tower at the very end, where it becomes like really self-aware and like there starts to be a strange dialogue between the people writing the show and the fans of the show. And it's very like the final season of Supernatural is a story about like God being unsatisfied that his favorite TV show that he wrote was going on for too long and wants to finally make the final season. Like I'm like that's literally the story of what's happening. There's many video essays that you can watch about like how like hostile this show became towards its own fans. Like there is an episode where the idea of supernatural fan fiction that ships
I
the
know every
brothers,
detail about this because I had a friend
it's
in high school who
wild.
wrote a very popular supernatural fan fiction who told me every little detail about that 200th episode where
Yep.
they get magically teleported into a little world where they're in a high school and a bunch of teenage girls
And
talk about how cute they are.
it's
And
fucking
it's really
weird.
misogynistic.
Yeah, it's really ugly. So like it's Supernatural's just one of those shows that like started off with like a really big following and like it kept its following because of that teenage girl fan base. Like I would say that Supernatural laid the groundwork for Twilight to become what it was, honestly. Like it's that kind of
Ooh.
alt, like it feeds right
Supernatural is
into.
Twilight without the shame from the mainstream.
Yeah, it's
Right?
like it was
And
cooler to
that
like.
allowed Twilight to overcome the shame from the mainstream in a certain kind of way.
Precisely. So like it's, classic instance of show that started off being good, went on for too long, ruined by executives and all of that. But this anime here was like literally done just because Supernatural was successful and they thought that like this was in a period where licensing was a little like again, it was a little less strict than it is
This
nowadays.
is
But
2011 we're talking about,
yeah,
by the way, folks.
so they are like basically it's just, the idea of Japanifying a very American property. Like the best way to put how watching this show feels is that Carry On My Wayward Son, the sort of trademark song of Supernatural, is used as an anime ED for this show, and it is so weird.
Ugh,
It's so
every
weird.
episode,
Carry
every
on
single
my
one.
wayward son. Day
Ugh.
peace when you are done.
The couple of
Every
times that they
single
actually
one.
end an episode on a note that's too sad to have the lyrics and you don't realize that they're playing Carry On My Wayward Son, or they just
So
like kick it with the, when the instruments actually come in. It's so funny.
Let's
It's so funny to
let's
me.
I think the best way to talk about this show, which is a show of a lot of like there's no like byline for this like there was with Cowboy Bebop where I could really succinctly tell you what it is about it that doesn't work in very generalized terms.
I
Whereas
agree.
with
This is a
this,
very mysterious artifact we have on our
you
hands.
it's a second by second thing. The best way to describe it to people, I feel like, is by talking about to stop burying the lead. How fucking terrible of a first episode this thing has. This is the
Well, because
opposite
that's the
of
thing
things
is
I've
that
recommended
I
you before, where some of them start out with promise, whereas the beginning of this is a mess.
Me, though, having no concept of what the show was
Mm,
about in its opening beats, I see this first episode and I go, okay, so we're just gonna do the Monster of the Week thing. This is fine, and it's a good premise, but not for a first episode. This is
no.
not a good first episode premise because the monster that they are fighting in the first episode of the anime is a shapeshifter. And
Yeah.
so, what you do, here's my producer whiteboard brain. What you do is that you take the shapeshifter, you put him at the end so that the shapeshifter can actually be the crux of some emotional challenges that the characters are having. But no, in the first episode, it's just a shapeshifter that pretends to be Sam and Dean and the hot girl that they meet along the way. And the shapeshifter occasionally tries to guilt trip one of the brothers, and then it doesn't work. And then they kill it, and then it's over.
So there's a couple things about this first episode I want to specifically mention. And the first thing is that you basically just put the entire conflict perfectly. That being said, the final like 8 minutes of this first episode
Oh my
to
God.
me are impossibly confusing. I had no idea who the like at first it almost is so incompetently plotted that it actually ends up accomplishing confusing the viewer enough to the point where you're like, wait, who is the shapeshifter?
I completely see
Because
where you're coming from because when you get to the end and they're in the car, I couldn't tell you who it was until the scene was over.
exactly, I was like, I know that the show is being directed like it has told me who the shapeshifter is, and I'm supposed to know that one of them has the jump on the other, but I actually have no
I
idea
want
at
to I want to
all.
give it a little bit more credit than that because this episode doesn't plant that many breadcrumbs as to where the
I would
shapeshifter is
argue
in the
it, in
third
fact, plants
act.
too few.
Yeah, in the third act, it does not plant many breadcrumbs as to it ends with Sam and Dean in the car. They're driving out of town, and you know that one of them is the shapeshifter because they start having some whack ass conversation. But you never know who it
And
is until and
it's,
they pulled this moment off pretty well, which is why I think I want to give it a little bit more credit than you are.
hmm,
When Sam, because how it's introduced is that Dean is driving the car and sees Sam in the road.
yeah.
And that's when it clicks. And I want to give them a little bit of credit because, yeah, they don't have to plant breadcrumbs to make a story like this work dramatically. In fact, I actually kind of like the ambiguity of that interaction, but it's the one little nugget of like, maybe they did this on accident, maybe they did this on purpose, but
It,
it's at least interesting.
well, you see, and it would clear and parse if like there's a way you do this where it's a really smart thing to do because you could have the shapeshifter reveal something essential about the character that the character themselves might not be, willing to like voice. Like essentially you can have the antagonist be a commentary on your character to tell the audience something essential about what they are and what their dynamic is.
Which
They
again, you
that
can't do that in the first episode of this show because not only are they strangling the pace of this with fishing wire, but having that story idea is not a good first episode idea.
because you need to know who Sam and Dean are. And the way they're characterized in this episode is Sam talks a lot, and Dean is a fucking terrifying pervert. Like he's and he is an overt flirt, which is that is from the original show, but the way
Yeah.
it holds on Dean leering at this woman's ass when she opens the door to the house, where he's just like, it's so terrifying.
I need to tell you all that yes, this is 2011. The animation is a little bit ugly, just off
It's
base. Like
it is
the art style is not there.
it
It
doesn't
looks like
look right.
somebody, it looks like there's this weird uncanny valley to it, right? Where again, this is 2011. You've got Avatar: The Last Airbender on TV at the same time this is, and it looks like a bunch of Americans tried to do that with something else and they messed it up because
And
there's so many visual elements of this show that are trying so hard to be like big anime moments, but
really stylized.
they don't fit the aesthetic. There's one
It
moment where in a John Winchester flashback episode, he dives through a window, guns akimbo, and it holds on him mid-air. And I'm just like, what show do you think we're watching here, man? What do you think this
well,
is?
like there is an attempt to sort of emulate the gothic vibe by making this super contrast heavy and have lots of shadows, and that leads to this being like there is a distinct stylization to this show that I think allows some images to look pretty cool as long as nothing is moving within them. But also there like some like the introduction of the first murder, like the way it's directed with like the broken glass and the moonlight, and like that segment is like pretty well directed and put together. It's just that no episode of this show has a sort of consistent scene to scene flow to it, because again the
Yeah.
pacing is choppy, and the way that this is animated is like, yeah, there are lots of different angles going on here, but it means that these characters are off model all the fucking time and they look so goofy, dude. Like they always look super serious because they're doing all this stuff, and then like there's occasional moments where it'll pull back and like it kind of looks like the like Dean when he's like smiling kind of looks like he's Maze Hughes from Full Metal Alchemist, and it's like I don't really know how well, like Dean being
His
like
hair color is just
wide-eyed.
straight up not correct, and that messed with me the whole time.
It doesn't help that one thing that severely hindered this for me, and like this may be a me problem, but it's like Jared Padalecki voices Sam in this show. And honestly, he performs the voice exactly as Sam Winchester. His
Yeah,
voice
you got to think
performance is
they were 5 or 6 seasons in when they started making
and
this, and Jared Padalecki
indistinguishable.
has to play day one Sam again, and yeah, it's pretty indistinguishable from those first few episodes of the show for me.
It's not like the most he's not dialed in, but like he's doing a serviceable job. And then you have the guy who plays Dean for the first 20 episodes because apparently because of scheduling conflicts,
Scheduling.
Dean's voice actor Jensen Ackles could only voice him in the final episode, and an impersonator does it for the first 20 episodes, which at that point I really don't know what like why they even
It's
bothered,
kind of
but
like what do you that's my biggest example of my problem with this show, which is who is this for? If you're not gonna get Jensen to do the voice, who is this
and
for?
and the guy who replaces Jensen Ackles sucks.
He's
Like
really
he's
bad.
he's
He's
just
really
not
bad.
giving it anything. He's like he kind of says Sam the same way he does, where he's like Sam. He's kind of got like that in his throat. Like he's kind of got that,
But the
but
funny
like
thing is that when I got to the last 2 episodes and I realized that Jensen was here, it
uh
somehow got worse because Jensen is doing a horrible job. He
so
sounds like
flat.
he sounds like he's doing, have you seen that video of Tom Hiddleston doing Owen Wilson doing Loki?
No.
He sounds
What?
like that. There's a video
That's
of him in the
awesome.
Loki costume where he's just like, yeah, I'm gonna do an Owen Wilson impression while I say Loki lines.
And
Uh,
like Dean is a character who is like 100% of his character's appeal is that he's charismatic, and the guy is reading his lines with the dry charm of a serial killer. Like it's just you're getting nothing from this dude. And like the side characters in this, they vary in levels of like episode exclusive characters can either be perfectly acceptable additions to the cast or utterly confounding. There's one character who is in one episode of this show where I saw it and I was instantly like, what exactly were they thinking here?
which one is it? Go ahead.
The queer character.
Oh God,
What
I forgot!
what
I
the
forgot about
fuck
this!
was
I have
going
notes
on?
about this, but I forgot about it. Oh God.
Like what that entire episode
That's the
is
worst one.
it's
That's the worst one,
bad.
which is a
It's
feat.
it's really bad. Like
It's
it
awful.
it starts off very funny because it's like the premise of it is that it's basically Christine, like there's a spirit in a car that's killing people. And there is like an outlandish number of murders that have happened in like the last year. Like they're like the last 38 murders in this last year. It's like, wait, 38? That
I hope
seems like a bit much.
I hope everybody is enjoying my cough laugh because this has been a very laugh heavy segment. But let me
Please.
rewind a little bit. I think I knew it was over in the second episode. You know how in the last segment that we
Is
did
that
on
the
Mean
one with the
Girls?
twist in it?
No. Listen.
Okay.
We made fun of the phrase "a party with revenge" is what it's like in the Mean Girls episode.
Yeah.
That is still worse than what I'm about to say. But the phrase "a planned suicide" comes pretty close to "a party with revenge" is what it's like. And that's when I
Oh,
knew we were out of gas.
is
It's the
that
second episode. And mind you, this is 22 episodes. And it's not even in sequence, right? They're not even
no?
doing direct adaptations of like each episode in order.
The first episode is like episode 4.
You get 10 episodes in before you see Jessica, much less what happens to her,
Before
which
you
is
even
the whole
find
crux of how
out,
the show starts. That's the thing that leads them on the journey is
you don't
Jessica
know if
dying.
Jessica is even dead or exists in the first 2 episodes. It's like what, like
It takes
guys,
you 10 episodes to realize that Jessica even exists at all. I'm
like
going to
that's
lose
what
my voice by the end of this segment. Fuck.
it is literally like it's like here's Full Metal Alchemist, but oh, we forgot to mention that their mom died. Like what are we fucking talking about?
It
Like what
really
do
is
you
like that
mean?
level, though.
It's like beginning the story without addressing the main thing that sets you out on the journey is just like, and again, it doesn't have like, it is so comical how often the idea of John Winchester is tossed to the side in this first
Ugh.
season here. Like at the beginning of like every episode, they're just like, have you heard anything about Dad? No, I tried calling him and he didn't answer. It's like, it's that every single episode.
Which again is the whole reason the show starts.
They're trying
Those
to
two
find him.
things are what drive the pilot, and neither of them get represented in any meaningful way for a majority of the runtime of this show. Just again, this is eating Cowboy Bebop's nachos really hard because we just start basically in medias res in the first episode. Like Sam and Dean are already on the road together. You
Yep.
don't have any idea who they are or what they do.
And
They
there's
just
no
pull up.
exposition. None at
None.
all.
None
And
at
I'm just
all.
like, I can't believe my problem with this is that I want an anime to have more exposition. That is not a problem that I am always like, it's either weird and esoteric and like I don't want anything to be explained to me, or there's a fantasy world and they have to explain things too much. Whereas this is just like I would just like to know why these characters are here, like just a basic reason, and it's like it comes up as the story wants to address it and not necessarily as what makes dramatic sense for the story that's being told. And
Yeah, and like
the
to continue the Cowboy Bebop thread, if you want to comp the way that they treat the yellow-eyed demon in this, what is his name in the actual show?
It might be
Is it
like
Azazel?
Azazel.
Is
I
it
think it's
Azazel?
Azazel. Azazel at least has like historically been depicted as a yellow-eyed demon, so I think
Anyway,
that's it.
Azazel and Vicious are actually kind of
Yeah,
comparable
comparable.
characters in how they affect the narrative of these two specific instances, right? Where
100%.
whenever Azazel is on screen, the plot of the show locks in the same way
Yeah.
that Vicious does for Cowboy Bebop. The problem is that when you structure your show this way, the way that the Supernatural anime does, at a certain point, Azazel should be all that Sam and Dean are worried about, but they just kind of keep wandering around and running into other things.
In a way that somehow feels even more disjointed than those episodes, which clearly exist just to be episodes with, a specific monster of the week plot. Like the original show does a much better job at loosely stringing together why they need to be doing all these little shortcuts on the
Yeah, there's
way
always a
to their
little bitty
destination.
conversation about like, oh, dad knows a guy, or I found this in dad's book, or like,
Or
we have a lead, we think dad is here, da 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 da. But this has done
basic.
nothing to tie why they are in a particular place and time,
I mean, like
what
not
is
for
actually
nothing,
happening.
but the setup of Supernatural and the setup of Full Metal Alchemist is like exactly the same. Like if you think about it in broad strokes, it's like two
Yeah.
kids with a traumatic past where their mom was killed by mysterious forces, and they need to go across the country uncovering various episode long conspiracies that will ultimately lead them to their dad, who knows more about something than he's letting on, and blah blah blah. And that's an example again of how to do like there are specific episode or arc long plots that weave together into a grander story. And here it's just like it is either in A plot mode or B plot mode, and like there's no, it's like they have a quota, they need to hit it, and it's each episode is for the sake of like getting the beats out of the way, which kind of dampens the fact that again sometimes the production of this show occasionally can be like moody and atmospheric and such, and sometimes when the animation isn't solely focused on putting a bunch of shitty ugly white artifacts to imply something supernatural, which is something that they do way too many fucking times and does not look good enough to instill me with awe. But still, occasionally there's a spooky moment or whatever, but the pacing always ruins it. It is always like rush through this, go through this. Like there's no time to let a scene breathe. And that's the thing. There is in the original TV show. Yeah, it is longer, but it's allowed to sort of give itself into these specific moments that are like really creepy. Again, it's following in the tradition of the X-Files, which, also is a good example of the show, the episodic format and the duo that have to go places, very, very much the same thing. But it's like everything about this is like it has all the same elements. They're just shifted to the left and everything starts to not make sense. You're suddenly very aware of why the formula of shows like Supernatural exists the way that it does and why it functions so efficiently and why this does not, and why again, there are some episode premises here that just absolutely boggle the fucking mind. Most notably to me, the one where they're like, "We gotta find this guy who supposedly died on this highway place here," and they, you can sort of tell that the dialogue is like very being specifically tailored so that they're not mentioning something about the mission that they're on, and they find this guy's wife, and she's looking for him, but it turns out that the twist is that they were looking for her and she's a ghost and
Oh
her
God.
husband is actually the alive one, and it's like this is this sucks. This is so
It
this
all
like it's
sucks,
literally just
man.
to hoodwink the audience. It's literally just like
At least the Goosebumps show knew when some of those
oh
books needed 2 episodes.
this that
I'm
shows
talking about the OG. I'm not talking about the 2023 one that we watched a couple
both of
episodes
them
ago.
still running circles around how their own formulas work. Like they still understand that like neither one of those shows would make this very very elementary very stupid mistake. This is such a mistake it's a cliche that it's a mistake. Like it's the equivalent of the fucking like just being like, and it was all a dream or fade to black. Like, are you fucking like, really? Really? That's what we're doing here? And it's really not the only time that that happens. They have to stretch themselves to make excuses for shit. Like in that one episode with the Christine car where they're like, "Oh, what could possibly be the solution to our problem? Oh, the ghost is still alive because of the tire treads. The ghost is living in the
If we
tire
scuff up
treads."
the tire treads on the road, the ghost will die.
It's like, uh,
And I
uh
really thought, because we talked about this with Cowboy Bebop too, where I really thought I had confusing thoughts about, gender and sexual politics and anime with characters like Ed from Cowboy Bebop and characters like Haku from Naruto. But man, when I tell you, I've seen the worst of it now, and Haku and Ed are not as bad as I thought they were, because at least they have some ambiguity to them that makes it interesting to talk about.
least they're
This
not
is just
Michael.
at least they're not Michael.
That hit me so hard because here's where I was at is that when this character pops up in this episode, Sam and Dean are doing like this normal investigative thing and they get involved with the cops and they get thrown into a prison cell. And this happens in the normal show all the time where they have to figure out how to get out of, law enforcement's entanglement. And someone shows up to just kind of let them out who's just sort of ambiguously defined as the sheriff's like sibling
Yeah,
who
he's a
has
brother.
some distinguished position that allows them to do this, even though I'm still not entirely certain what, but like this person shows up and says, that their name is Michael, and they have a very effeminate, very kind of non-binary quality about them immediately. And my first instinct was, oh, is this going to be their take on Michael the angel, the character from Supernatural? And
I
are
have
they
no
going to
idea
do
where you're
like their
going
own?
with that.
I just thought I was just like, oh, is this going to be their take on the character of Michael who's going to save them? Because often the angels would get involved in the brothers' antics. And no, this is just a normal guy named Michael who they introduce as like like Michael says that they wanted to be a female cop. Like explicitly, that's the term that they
Yeah, like
use.
I asked if I could be a lady cop.
And it's being done with this like very kind of like a higher sort of lilted voice that like and then like they of course overtly are just like, oh, you two boys are my type, and like in just the voice that you're just like, oh well, that was about the least flattering way you could have
Yeah,
possibly said
he's
this.
got the voice. I'm not gonna front with you guys.
No, and it's just it's like I don't even know if I can criticize this as problematic. What I can criticize it as is what's it doing here? Like I just like what is like is this it? Like is the bit just like look at this queer and like and then they
But
like
it's
they
not because like
die.
they're not Sam and Dean, excuse me, aren't laughing at him. They just think
No,
he's a little
like
bit weird.
it's like they kill off Michael very unceremoniously as well, and it's just this strange moment where like it's very much the idea of like there's like a very specific Japanese idea of like a comedic sort of like gay like hard gay kind of stereotype that is clearly Japanese and is now interacting with this thing that's Japanese, but mimicking the style of something Western, something American, and just none of like the parts just
None of the
don't.
parts, yeah, the parts don't coalesce. They don't congeal. But I think one thing that we haven't talked about is the character of John Winchester, who
Old
is
John.
terrible and is played by a man who is doing his
Jeffrey Dean
best
Morgan.
impression of a hungover Clancy Brown.
Yeah, just a kind of mumbly, kind of deep, growly, like
Yeah, I'm gonna use my sick voice to get this impression out. But again, when Jensen Ackles shows up, he sounds like half of his mouth isn't moving. So he's just, save me, save me, save me, save me,
I'm the comedian.
save me, get over here.
Just
Save me, what are you
barking,
doing?
basically.
Oh, it's so. But that's the thing is that at a certain point you cross a threshold with this show where you just realize that it's not going to get better, but it's not going to get worse either.
No, there's no
So much of it
dip.
is so lowercase serviceable,
Hmm.
which makes it, interesting to talk about and think about and watch because, like, yeah, they think they know how to structure an episode of television, and some of these are actually pretty decent. Like the maybe my favorite episode is the one with the Brian De Palma riffing. It's episode 8.
Yeah,
I couldn't tell you what
yeah.
happens in it, but there's a lot of Brian De Palma riffing in
For sure.
it.
Like there
But
is
it
a
does have the
strange
very funny
enough.
line read. It does have the very funny line read. We've got to do something before two more women are murdered. And then one woman immediately in the next scene, they're like, another woman has been
Another
murdered.
woman,
Oh
yeah,
crap.
there's a lot of like that where it like the translation is just a little bit, like a little bit uncanny or a little bit odd, and it'll make you go. But you're right. There is no dramatic like it is a very steady like it plateaus. Like I would actually say that the worst episodes of the show are like the first within like the first half mostly.
I no, I don't disagree actually, because the parts of the later episodes I find bad, I at least find funny. Like there's one the one about the fish man that is secretly saving everyone. Um
Yeah,
It
yeah, yeah.
starts with a Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. I'm very horny level cold open is just a riot.
Oh man, like there are moments like I wouldn't say that this show is in within the realm of funny bad enough to constitute a watch, but like
No,
one of
it's
these days
not. Don't
somebody
waste
needs
your
to edit
time
like
with
a
this.
highlight reel because there's like a great 15-minute long YouTube video that should be edited from this entire show that would be hysterical.
Of just like, yeah, bad line reads in this. It would
Yep,
be really funny.
mostly from
And
fake Jensen.
oh yeah, fake Jensen. I can't stress enough. Is really bad. These
Just
two performances are just not compatible at all. And the chemistry between those two leads is what makes so much of those early episodes work, right? And so if you have
100%.
like a Sam that is, 75% locked in and a Dean that is in another dimension, the show just doesn't work at a certain
No.
point.
Like it was probably always going to come up short against the OG, but like you think about what so many anime, even anime from this era succeed at, and it's just like, well, if you want to do supernatural, just do Bleach. Like that's this it's like the same thing. It's like the
It's not
same
the first
thing.
time you've compared these two shows to each other. You've gone out of your
Yeah.
way to
So
compare some
like
elements of Supernatural to
there's
Bleach, so I see where you're going with this.
there's a way you could do like I almost think that like just doing adapting supernatural like because it does it in such a straight-laced way of like it even does the like title inserts of like the way that the name of the show flashes around and stuff like
They're also
it
poorly timed.
mimics every single like technique that is around like the frame of the core of the show. And it's like I appreciate your willingness to commit to the set dressing, but this probably would have been better if you had just not tried to exactly mimic this, but arbitrarily change everything so that it's just like nothing in this show is good, but there's also a limit to how bad it is. Every individual element is just pretty bad. It's not terrible. It's not
Yeah.
distracting. It's just that every single thing about it is categorically not good.
And so I don't think I can go higher than a 3 on this just because I already forgot most of it.
It's
And
very
it was
forgettable.
not it was not impressively bad. Even if I was a bigger
No.
fan of the show than I am, I would probably say the same thing. We're just like, aha, it's kind of funny that they tried, but
Yeah,
that's the funniest thing about this is that
it
they
is
tried
that they
and
did
this
it
is
at
what
all.
came of it.
And that
Yeah.
it's kind of why I wanted to examine it as just an oddity of an example of something that just did not regularly happen and thus is like uniformly bad in ways that not a lot of things are, but when you compare it to the realm of bad things, it's not uniquely unpleasant.
No, it's really like without the legacy from which it grows itself out of, it's a pretty boring, bad
Hmm.
kind of thing. It's like a it's like a 3 out of 10 movie that you forget about after you watch it.
Hmm.
It's like the Snake Eyes movie, the G.I. Joe Snake Eyes movie.
God,
The best
yes.
example I could think of is that I immediately forgot about
I
everything that happens in
remember
the
I remember
G.I. Joe
thinking,
Snake Eyes movie, aside from the
why
fact
is
that it
this movie
exists.
in a parking garage? And that's the only thing I remember about it. There was a lot of parking garage shots.
Robert Schwenka is just 3 Marvel second unit directors in a trench coat.
It's fine. It's cool.
Segment for this episode was, as I advertised it in the previous one, the hardest album that I've ever managed to finish, ever managed to get through. It's an album called GR by Death Pile. It is a power electronics album that is a first person perspective of the Green River Killer, aka Gary Ridgway, who was a prolific serial killer in the early 1980s. This was an experiment. Death Pile was mostly run by one guy whose name is Jonathan Kennedy. And he said in a couple of interviews that I managed to dig up floating around the internet that he was inspired to make this album when Ridgway was arrested in 2002 because a number of these crimes were unsolved for decades. And Kennedy decided that he wanted to make a power electronics album exploring the voice and the mental space of someone who is capable of killing dozens of people because the Green River Killer allegedly dozens. Like it's really bad. I'm not
Like a
gonna lie to you
lot. A
guys.
lot, a
I'm gonna
lot.
have a hard time getting through this segment because this album is work
This
and
is not a
just
fun album. Just
this is not
throwing that
fun.
out there.
This is not fun. Please don't think you're
This
gonna
is
have fun when you
this
listen
is
to
the
this.
least fun thing we have talked about on this show by a considerable distance.
I recommended it though because again, one, it has the hook of being like, oh, Jen is not the one that listens to the hard albums. I wonder what this is gonna be. But I think you were enticed by that just as much as anybody
Oh
else would
yeah.
be. But I also want to situate this in a true crime media environment where explorations of the modes of thinking of prolific serial killers are often a subject of intrigue. You know, you've got all these. I'm gonna
Ryan
get,
Murphy
I'm
directed.
gonna get more depressed as I go through this segment, aren't I?
Yep.
You've got like Snapped, and you've got all these like, why did the true crime happen? And like, none of this stuff has ever like worked for me at
No.
all. I don't get the catharsis out of learning about these things because for me, learning about what a shitty person did, unless I can do something about it, doesn't make me feel good, or unless it's gonna like recontextualize something that I know about history, like, Killers of the Flower Moon. Great
Yeah.
example of an actual way to do that that resonates with me because it changes, or at least gives me a specific point of history that exemplifies, some kind of larger truth that everybody is searching for in the true crime media ecosystem if they're not just searching for like drama slop. And the interesting thing about GR is that even though it does have a lot of research behind it, it obviously situates itself opposite a lot of true crime media
Hmm.
because there are no answers to be found in GR about its subject. It is purely a work of intrigue by an artist about their subject. And you can choose to go about that however you wish, right? There are
Hmm.
many character portraits in media that have very different purposes, like biopics or, again, true crime documentaries are another example of this. But GR is a very unique attempt to portray a real life historical figure that exists in conversation with this type of thing. Because true crime media, I don't know, where does the explosion come? Does it come after Zodiac or does it come with like
I was
BuzzFeed
actually going to
Unsolved
touch on
or
Zodiac for a couple of reasons, and that I
please
think
do. Go ahead.
I think that Zodiac is kind of a point at which this becomes a bit more sensationalized. And the reason I think that Zodiac kind of stands out from that crew is that it's literally about not being like the most horrifying thing about Zodiac is that they don't catch the killer. Like it's all left up to interpretation more or less,
The
and
one
it's
time
all
I showed that
about
movie to my dad and we got to the end and they were like, wait, they didn't get him?
yeah,
Wait.
and that's supposed to make you feel like shit, and it does. Like it's Zodiac and Killers of the Flower Moon actually have the exact same tenor to me, is that by the ending, you're just like, ugh, you're bathing in real life evil. And it wasn't necessarily like the problem with all of these, like the Ryan Murphy fucking like monster documentary or whatever's, or all of these things. The problem is that they not only do they like needlessly sensationalize and to some extent glorify these figures, but what they all end up doing is their mommy was mean to them, and so then they became a murderer. Like it's literally it's always that. That's the approach that they always end up taking, and it's like beyond being very reductive, like you're inevitably going to complicate matters and how these figures and how these like issues are sort of seen, portrayed, and perceived as is that it's all the same. Like it's a bunch of bullshit and it's like I'm sorry, but like I don't really care to know. It's just like, yeah, I assume most serial killers probably had really bad childhoods, and like
Yeah, like
it's
what
not
do
a
I do with
place.
that
It's
information?
nothing valuable. So like, but the idea of doing this, like, I feel like within even the harsh noise sort of scene, I feel like this belongs to a wave of music that was born on the internet and seen as being kind of taboo, like this kind of spoken word stuff and like these things being like controversial is like it's kind of a long held tradition at this point. Like there's one of the most infamous musical recordings and like lowest rated things on Rate Your Music is the like a project of a guy who like supposedly recorded having himself have sex with a corpse. Like it has this root in taboo ideas and shit that have like probed the oh, what's the word I'm looking for? The perversion of the mundane, so to
Right.
speak. So I guess going into this, I was just like, okay, so this is going to be like a power electronics, like harsh noise kind of thing, and like I make it no secret that I like a lot of really challenging music, but like I don't listen to Merzbow, but I have listened to a lot of collabs that Merzbow has done with bands like Boris. Like one of my favorite bands is Lightning Bolt. Like I am very well acquainted with music that hurts your ears a little bit or that is challenging to listen to after an amount of time. And like I'm not fully into harsh noise to the extent where like I am listening to shit like Pulse Demon. Like I've tried and I that is one bridge I cannot cross. But I was still like, I know what this is getting at conceptually, and I want to see how this goes about executing its ideas. And I found this to be very fascinating just because of how like experiential something like this is. is that it's just literally like going into it, I was primed by the fact that like, you look at this album on Rate Your Music and it's not very well received, even though a lot of people have reviewed it. So
I have
initially
not looked
my
at this on Rate Your Music. I
my
I only found this album because of the clipping connection. I was so
oh, okay.
fascinated
And
by it that I listened to it.
well, it's a very controversial record for the subject material, and just the, harsh noise in itself is also just not something for everyone. So, like, I went into this seeing so that, like, this is a all or nothing kind of thing. Is that people either were just like, I found this really effective, or I found this in poor taste and didn't like it at all. And I was like, okay, I feel like I'm getting a rare instance where I get to go in to something and I have no precedent for this, and I don't know, like, I go into this and I'm like, yeah, this is controversial, but like I often am like, I could see this as being a bridge too far, or I could see this being particularly effective. Like, I have no
Yeah,
idea what I'm
it's
gonna
one of
get
those
here.
things where like describing this album in plain terms doesn't really summarize the experience of listening to it. So
No,
you
not at
never
all.
know. You don't know until you hit play what this is gonna do to you.
And I did so in an environment where I did it with headphones and I did it without headphones. I did it on a sound system, and I almost recommend doing it if like you have a car or something. It's like it's not a very long album, thankfully, but like if you can get it into a point where you have nice big earphones, or just have a space where you could listen to something this loud with zero consequences, I would almost recommend that, just because the immersion is the point, and regardless of whether or not you end up enjoying it, that's how you get maximum impact. So this basically begins, and it is kind of, you
The
get you
first
get two
track,
main
the first track, Genesis, when that like those enveloping when those layers are starting to come in as the album starts, it sounds like the goddamn Exorcist 3 soundtrack.
yeah,
Or like the
more or less.
those like walls of noise that are all throughout that movie whenever like the presence of
Hmm.
evil is there, and it's ooh, anyway.
Somber immediately. You're like,
Yes.
okay, there's gonna be darkness here. But like when you get to like the main body of the album, at first, for a good portion of it, there are really two main ideas. One is the kind of collision of harsh noise happening, which is big, loud, abrasive. It is just these two warring, cloudy textures that are, as peaked in the mix as they can possibly be. And this person shouting, screaming, screeching, basically, as the sort of central presence of what you can kind of assume is the killer on the album. And like you immediately get him, and you can like hear him pretty cogently throughout the process of the album, but the first things you kind of hear him say are things just like, "Oh, I went away in the Navy for 4 years and I came back to a whore." Like you are immediately getting just this gross, vulgar, just awful misogynistic depictions of women and how he sees, and it's like, and he's just kind of repeating these stanzas, these points over and over again. It's, I mean, basically pure simulation of what must be in these fucking people's heads who do these things. And immediately it's like, yeah, it's really effective. It's super fucking unpleasant, and you immediately like you're forced to conjure these ideas and just sit within a space where you feel like, just that evil is just approximating you, and you don't want it to get on you. It's gross. It's like listening to this feels like you're constantly trying to like clean yourself and you can't
May
quite get all the
May
tar off.
Shout out to May Leeds, aka Nick Spheres is her YouTube channel name, who made a whole big epic video about the idea of not safe for life
Hmm.
video material. Basically just like random stuff that if you know that it exists and you go looking for it is gonna hurt. And one of
Hmm.
the examples that she used was the audio tapes of the Toy Box murders. And she
Right.
describes there were reports. One, we know that the FBI uses those tapes to like train agents to like deal with whatever. Like
Yeah.
the FBI imagines this as the worst possible thing somebody could be subjected to. And she describes like if you put audio of the Toy Box murders on in a room, people will just run away from it. People will
You
not
know
do
what it made me
anything
think
else.
of?
They will
We
just run away from it. And
we
I got about to addicted before I
yeah.
started having that feeling of like I'm sitting at my desk, I'm listening to this album, and I want to run away from this
You do
noise.
want to turn it off. Legitimately you like, and you know what? Maybe pace yourself if you actually decide to listen to something like this. But you know what it made me think of is what I talked about in a segment on here months ago as I talked about the movie Red Rooms, where
Yeah,
there
yes,
is
I was thinking about Red Rooms
audio
as well.
in that is of a rape and murder, and it is one of the most singularly unpleasant things. And that is, it still has the extra layer of reality of me knowing that it's fictionalized. Whereas there is something about media like this that's almost Blair Witch Project-esque and kind of blurs the line of just like when the point is immersion, it doesn't matter if there's a barrier of reality in between you and the work. It kind of dissipates if you let it become this purely sort of Eisensteinian experience inside your brain, which is kind of how I like tried to go about it. And it's again, it is like the best way I can describe it is it's like constantly trying to scrub yourself clean, even though all of you keeps getting dirty. It's just like it's sensory. It becomes very acute after a while, very repetitive, and like if it is loud enough, it does actually start to legitimately hurt your ears. You may
My
need
ears
to
were
like
ringing
scale it
by the
back.
time that I turned this off. Like I didn't pause it because I wanted to like really feel
Oh
this.
yeah,
And so
like this
I
is
sat, I listened to every single second of it without stopping. And then
uninterrupted.
I didn't even have it that loud, but I just like felt my ears ringing by the
I
time it was
I
over.
need to do it as designed like a Swans album. Like I can't not break like if I break up the experience for me personally, that ruins the point of the exercise. But like it's this collision is really repetitive, and what happens is that the guy like saying all of these awful things basically gets less and less coherent and just devolves into nothing but just vocalizing and screaming and all of that, and it's just like it's yeah, like it does take considerable willpower to just kind of sit there, which is impressive. And there are moments where like they were so close, for instance, which
Ugh.
becomes like, you really you sort of get closer and closer to understanding what the mentality of this person was like right before and right as he committed these crimes, and like basically like the more along the track list you get, the closer you experience to what this simulation is supposed to be of actually experiencing him killing someone, and like the aftermath essentially of him killing someone, which is
Right. It's an internal monologue that is at first performative in some extents, right? There are moments where he more or less addresses a kind of audience, but there are many moments on this album where he's also very clearly just talking to himself and you are being subjected to it.
the only thing I can compare to what it feels like is it feels like the performance style and sort of techniques that are utilized by Kristen Hayter of Lingua Ignota, particularly on her album Caligula, where there are just moments of like the death industrial noise just kind of cuts out, and it's just somebody screeching in horror and pain, and it's like peaking the mic, and you can hear the like reverberate around wherever they're screaming in it, and it's just like it's so uncomfortable, and you just kind of have to sit with it. But this took a really different turn about like 12 minutes in, where the kind of initial first phase of the album kind of stops and you go to known victims, which is the longest single moment on the record.
Yeah.
Though before this, the moment that Jen had referenced that I was a little bit clueless on of terms of the clipping thing, where I was just like, this is a fucking, a harsh noise album. Am I even going to be able to pick out this sample? Like, is it going to be tangible? And then the moment, of course, at the beginning where you just hear unencumbered body and blood. I'm like, oh shit! That's where the banger comes from. You don't need you for shit but your dick and your guts and your veins,
Yeah, I
body
wish this
and
was as
blood.
as fun as the. No, I don't. That's the thing. Is it
No,
like
it's not. It
I
shouldn't
want
be.
to I want to point in this direction, which is like I hate sensationalism. I hate it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna watch that goddamn Michael Jackson movie. I
No, no,
hate
no, no.
sensationalism. I can't stand it in a world that is already so mired in assumption and falsehood. Sensationalism only does more to cement that. And for all the, weight that this album puts on you if you decide to listen to it, I would never describe this as sensational.
No. It's too insular and too
It lacks
ugly.
catharsis.
No, not well,
It
and
doesn't even it doesn't even go that far out of its way to avoid catharsis is the thing. It gets there kind of at the end,
a little
but
bit. There is too much antagonistic about this. Like the reason I feel like we're okay with something like Zodiac is again is it's the point is what's not there. Is that everything about something that could be sensationalized, like, the way that the reason that Zodiac is disturbing is because that lakeside kill scene in that movie is shot and in the driest, least sensationalized way you can visualize a murder I've ever seen.
I
Like
mean,
whenever I
compare
watch
it
that scene
to
in that movie, I'm always hideously uncomfortable because I'm just like, oh, stop showing this. It like David Fincher feels like he doesn't want to be showing you what's happening, and he is doing it in a way where it's just like nothing about it is visually compelling. Like the sound design isn't satisfying. Like it is this moment of tight claustrophobia that you want to be away from.
what's funny is that there was a have you seen The Zodiac Killer, the 1971
No, I
movie
have
about
not, but I
this?
know it exists.
I watched it actually pretty recently. It was on my Hooptober list. And
Hmm,
that movie is honestly closer to this than anything I could think to compare it to because
interesting.
there are moments in that movie where you're seeing because even though they didn't know who the Zodiac Killer was, they invent some kind of character and they portray him to some extent. But you see him just like having private moments and talking to himself
Hmm.
about things. And that's what this feels like. And that movie, similarly, like there's a little bit of sensationalism to it, obviously, but all the, well, not obviously, you haven't seen it. There's a little bit of sensationalism to it, but all the violence is not that way at all. Whenever you actually see this dude outside killing people, it's dry, it's stark. There's a little bit of music here and there, but it's to add to the punch of, when the scene takes a turn. Um,
What I thought of when listening to this very specifically in reference to Zodiac is this is a 38-minute long album version of the I get headaches scene where the guy is over the phone and does that utterly inhuman sound that I am not sure how a human being made it, but that sound is what this album is like. Is that it's very, again, there's no holds barred, but it's just like you are confronting something through audio that doesn't necessarily feel tangible, real, or possible, but the reality of the subject material at least informs knowing that this did happen in some context and you can't escape that. Like the
yeah.
way that the victims' names are read in this portion of the album after the first one, which is kind of when everything sort of locked into place for me, is sort of what this was and what it was capable of. But known victims is just sort of these two ideas of the names of the known found victims of the killer and the way they were killed, and set to this kind of dark ambient instrumental that kind of relents a little bit, but you do hear the killer eventually just kind of like freaking out, but like the two ideas coexist within this song. And I think it's an interesting, like, I feel like this song kind of is a commentary on the idea of sensationalism, or just the idea of making art like this, and how, centered around the killers it often is rather than the victims, which, we've actually been talking about things like Zodiac and Killers of the Flower Moon, which are pieces of art that deliberately, as faulty of a perspective as they may be led with, they are attempting to voice the perspective of someone who does not have one, and sort of bringing that to the surface. And that's kind of what this song is doing, but it's also showing how easy it is that sensationalism, as long as it's there, it's like it always threatens. There's the idea where, you're listening to, paying reverence to what feels like almost, but you still can't get away from him. You can't get away from, like, no matter how respectful you are to these victims, and even if you give them a moment in your piece of media, it's like the context of that murder, it can never fully go away. It's a demonstration of just how evil and awful it is that someone who takes other people's lives gets to be a part of their narrative, no matter what, sensationalism or no. It's like it's an embodiment of that specific aspect of tragedy that, like, yeah, to some extent, when someone kills someone else, part of their legacy is forever enshrined in that horrible thing that happened. And
Oh
this is
God,
something that,
Renee, I love this point. Renee pulled a horrible trick on me because I
uh-oh.
did not know what happened to Selena. I had no fucking idea.
Oh.
And they just sat me down one day and they showed me that movie, the Jennifer Lopez Selena movie. And so
Ooh,
when I
that's
got to the
rough.
end, I was just reeling because I never heard the story before. I'm revealing myself to be a little bit less culturally conscious than
Yeah,
maybe I should
no,
be,
I
but
gotcha.
white boy from the South. I didn't grow up listening to Selena. Sorry.
No, same
Uh,
thing. Same thing.
but once I like, that's one of those rare instances where even if you're a public figure, that taints whatever you tried to give to the world if that happens
Hmm.
to you.
Forever. And it's even worse to some extent if you aren't a public figure in a context like this, because it's like you have no narrative of your own to supersede the narrative of I was murdered by this person who is now famous because this is how this works on a sociological level. Like it's that this is a segment of the album where I feel like it allows you to really ponder its purpose and what everything ends up kind of doing to you before it goes into the final segment of All You'll Ever Get, Kenworth, and You Will Never Know, where
That's the
it
one where it gets the
kind of.
most like textually antagonistic because you have the guy doing the voice of Gary
Mhm.
who is talking about like basically how there is no catharsis to be found in this. And then how by the way that Ridgway did things, he left so many more questions than answers. And you're always just going to have to reckon with this kind of uncertainty in the face of whatever drove him to do the things that he did. And when you're a person, I don't want to get too like parasocial about this, but when you're a person
Mhm.
like this and you don't understand yourself, and enough people try to tell you who you are, eventually you start to reel against that a little bit. And that's kind of what I appreciate about this record is that it resists the sensationalism by reassuring us that there is no cause. And that's frightening. It's frightening that there is no cause. But it's a relief in a different kind of way where a lot of true crime media is attempting to tell you what not to do as
Mhm.
a person who is alive in society, right? You don't do this on the first date because what if the guy's a serial killer?
Yeah.
And by the time you get to the end of this album and the way that he expresses like his inability to be known that gives him power, there's a kind of catharsis in that where you can see that truth and there is horror there, but it's a different kind of horror than seeing anything like this as a lesson for anybody.
Yeah.
It's just a shitty thing that happened.
It's very aware of being just like it feels as though it is knowingly self-interrogative. It sort of knows the ways in which it will be consumed, designed, experienced, and sort of intentionally puts ideas against each other and is just asking you to feel the friction rather than sort of like what was this experience like for you rather than like asking you a more involved question of like was this good or bad. It's really more of just like how did you feel from how we put this in front of you. It's a very base, very kind of like reactionary stimuli. It's why I see so many people having strong reactions to this and me completely understanding no like either sort of side of how this sort of works out because in many ways it is everything that like if you hate this everything you say about it's true and if you think this is really effective or like this a lot or think this is really interesting or like layered and complex you're also right but it's like it feels it's kind of impenetrable in that respect. So it was kind of weird for me
Yeah, I
to
mean, there
try
are
to
definitely
interact
ways
with
to be
this.
wrong about this album,
Oh,
but
for sure.
you have
There's
to
no,
try to hate this album. You know what I
and
mean? You have
I
to
feel
try
like
to have something negative to say about this.
I feel like a lot of the negativity around it could be written off as just like there's kind of a problem where like not to simplify it too much, but there's kind of just the idea of oh this piece of art made me feel bad, so it's bad. Like and I firmly do
There's a
not
ton of that out in
believe
the
in that.
world, and I
There
see that
is.
sentiment, and I wish I could just like shake those people and be like, "That's the point." But
Yes, I
you
understand
pass a certain threshold where I understand what you mean when you
like
say that, though.
and it's increasingly difficult to make this point too in a world where so much art is designed to comfort people and like to make them feel better and it's like yes but it should also push us out of our comfort zone and that extends to stuff like this so I don't like there's not an argument I have that I feel like that you can in good conscience say that I feel like this is you know, morally reprehensible. I kind of feel like that's a take that just it doesn't have enough sauce to it to hold
Nah,
complete logical sense.
I don't see that.
So I just wanted to come at this by saying how I felt in like a purely evaluative way. In that I found this to be very thoughtful and interesting. And it is very simple at the end of the day. Like in its construction, you can isolate about 13 different aspects, and those are the things in this album. And they happen for a long time and then they stop happening. And, I am very well acquainted with the idea of listening to stuff that is punishing. And this is up there. This is certainly up there in terms of how powerful and abrasive this actually is. Like the idea of me listening to mathcore, for instance, it's like the beauty in that is in the sort of skillful execution of the pageantry of breaking all of those rules. It's like it is its own form of being musically progressive. It's just instead of advancing a given formula, it's about breaking that formula. Whereas this is less about the command that you have over something and more the effect over a few things that you know how to utilize really, really well. So, in that respect, it's very effective as a kind of torture chamber of sociological conditioning and just like it puts a lot of fascinating ideas in your head. I have two not complaints but things that impeded
Hold
my
ups.
experience
Yeah.
with this in a broad scale because I do think this was successful on the one hand is that I don't know like I felt a lot out of this more than I thought I was going to because I kind of thought I would have the reaction that some people have to harsh noise, which is, that was a little one note. Like that's kind of my problem with stuff like Pulse Demon is that I listen to that and I'm just like, okay, I get it, but there feels like too few ingredients here sometimes. And that is not the case here. Not at all. That said, the harsh noise aspect of this feels like a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I feel like it effectively demonstrates that, like, I like art like this that kind of demystifies the idea of the serial killer, of like this instrumental being as repetitive and looping as it is. It's almost like it's disavowing the idea of like complexity. It's just like it's this simple looping, throbbing noise that is just like there was nothing greater here. This person was just full of hate in their heart and they killed people because of it. There's nothing more to understand about it. And yes, that's its own form of uncomfortable truth, but there's nothing complex about this. And us trying to make us like convince ourselves that these people are these evil geniuses who have these super unique minds is nonsense. It's simple. It's just this. It's just pain. It's just horror. And I feel like that works, but it also stops feeling effective. It feels artistically successful, but experientially, it felt a bit like it diluted the impact for me as the minutes ticked by. Like, I wish that maybe there
Yeah.
was a way to have this specific harshness with a bit more dynamism. And I don't know if that's a complaint that comes from half this genuinely being an issue or just the reason I enjoy abrasive music is most often because there is a lot of showmanship, which is admittedly not here. So this is hair splitting to me as being like, I had a problem with this, but I am willing to concede that it is not an issue with the album itself, or at
Yeah, I mean,
least
this
is
is
maybe
not
not
like
as
anything that you've
bad.
ever heard. So be as
No.
specific as you need to be to get the point
And
across, you know?
it's just that's sort of the way it is. It's effective, but it does have diminishing returns for me. And the other complaint that I have is also a bit of a double-edged sword, but it's really just more in I don't like this is as close to pearl clutching as I'll get here. I don't think that some of the lyrical ideas that happen after we get known victims, we go kind of far when it comes to the descriptions of the process of killing these women. And I feel two types of way about this. One, I deeply respect something that is willing to not sand itself down and is willing to present hard, blunt, true, objective reality. Like, don't sanitize this. Represent this evil, monstrous piece of shit as the evil, monstrous piece of shit that he was. But with this layer of there is still always going to be a level of theatricality and even pageantry to an extent of presenting art in front of someone. So just the idea of how far these descriptions go and, about what he does to the bodies and how he sexually violated them, to me, it was not necessary to feel the enormity of the experience. It kind of felt like the repetition that I felt earlier kind of felt as though it had diminishing returns that also made that feel like a bit of a bridge too far. It's not like again, this is not a problem that I feel like makes this lesser. It's just kind of a thing I have to chip away at with this experience. It's a very difficult thing to engage with. Rewarding because you will discover something about yourself by the end of this. I feel like that's like you go on a journey here and you know more about yourself
That's
by
the
the
essential
end of
takeaway
it.
that you need to have for this segment if you're watching this, is
Exactly.
like you are going to have an experience unlike anything else you've ever had if you listen to this.
This is in many respects, while I don't think it's perfect and does have its issues, it is something that I have deep respect for because there are so many things that like Elfen Lied, for example, that's something that has lots of touchy, raw nerve, icky, toxic, thorny issues within it. And it treats them with the grace of falling on your face like a fucking idiot. This doesn't treat the issues with grace, but it treats them with honesty, which is way more important and is increasingly scarce in a world that's just like, again, I prefer something that's ugly and thorny and potentially even like problematic or whatever the fuck that could mean in reference to this. I prefer that than to whatever, AI generated plastic. Here's some piece of comfort food to make you feel better about this. No, you sit down and you listen to this, and you're going to hug your loved ones a little bit tighter. You're going to be like, you know what? Maybe evil does exist in the world, and maybe it's not as interesting or grand as we make it seem in a lot of stories. Maybe it's just mundane and awful.
I just, like I said, I kind of sporadically came across this album again with the clipping connection. I figured out where that sample came from, and I thought, huh, that sounds kind of
It's
cool.
the closest this album has to
And I
having like
ruined
a
my whole
tangible
day
rhythm.
because of it. I ruined my whole day the first time that I listened to this.
What a rabbit hole. And this totally is something that they would sample on one of their earlier albums. It just makes complete and total sense.
One thing I do want to point out as a kind of detail that makes this more interesting for me is that if you know some of the details about the history, the character portrait gets a bit of different context to it. It's like, for example, on the second track, the first time that we hear Gary Ridgway's voice on this, he's screaming for Marsha, my first wife,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
first whore. Marsha was his second wife.
Oh. So
Yeah.
were they wrong or was that
No, they
just
did that on purpose. They did that on
Oh, okay.
purpose.
Okay,
They did that on
interesting.
purpose. Because he also like had sex with a bunch of sex workers while he was in Vietnam, and
Yep.
that's how he got gonorrhea. And
Yeah.
he
Gave me a
blames
disease.
yeah, he blames Marsha for that, right? The more that you know, the more his like skewed perspective gains a kind of clarity to it,
Yeah.
which is an interesting way to look at something like this. Whereas like compare that to watching like the what's the one with Zac Efron? The Ted Bundy Zac Efron.
Extremely wicked and incredibly vile, something along
Shockingly
those lines.
vile and whatever,
Yeah.
extremely loud and incredibly close. Tom Hanks dies in
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Fucking that's what I
Uh,
call it.
extremely wicked, shockingly evil and vile. I got it. Decent movie, but the more that you know about how Ted Bundy actually was, the worse that movie becomes in
Yeah.
terms of representation of its subject.
I don't care for the movie, but I do appreciate that it tried to go about its angle of like it was very much trying to be like, well, there wasn't really anything special about Ted Bundy at all. He was just kind of a handsome guy who just, was able to use his privilege through society to go undetected because,
All right, I mean, he's kind of a Trumpian figure where he was able to play the media for years
uh-huh.
and years and years in many different ways.
Yep.
Anyway, back to GR. Again, this is the most negative experience that I've had with an album that I would readily say that I love. I
I was
love
gonna
this
say
project a whole
I
lot.
did come away overall, my feelings on the work itself is like I don't know, like asking me whether or not I thought this was like if you ask me, did you enjoy this? My answer is of course fucking no. But like was like all I can tell you is good, bad does not work here. This is should you experience this or shouldn't you? My take is I think this is worth experiencing if you're the kind of person who can handle it. And if you were even the kind of person who's like, I don't know, if you doubt yourself, probably good to just steer clear. Because, like, again, this is
That's the thing
not
is that
fun.
you're not gonna learn anything from this.
You will about yourself. You like this is not good
Yeah,
for
yeah.
journalistic purposes. Like you're not gonna walk away and be like, "Oh, I want to read about this guy." Like if anything, I'm like, "I'm glad I've never heard of this motherfucker because he sounds like he deserves to be forgotten." Because ew. Like and I am always more predisposed to something where it's talking about serial killers like this where it tries to pay attention to the victims in any form at all. I am like that's like there's no rules on how to do this right or wrong, but if you want to get me in your good graces, that's how you do it. Like, acknowledging that that these people weren't just vessels for violence. It's good. We should do that more often rather than paint them as uniquely beautiful psychopath snowflakes, Ryan Murphy
God,
douchebag.
I think part of the reason that this was on my mind is because of that Ed Gein show that he's doing right now that
Yeah, it was. I see like clips
spends a
from it and I'm like,
significant amount of its
wow.
runtime on the production of Psycho, like
And apparently Oz
doing a
Perkins was just like, this is some bullshit, by the way.
doing a production of Psycho biopic instead of doing the actual story that you're marketing it as.
Yep.
Which is interesting. I'll give it that. That's interesting. I'm not gonna
That's
watch it
that's an
though.
angle. Ryan Murphy is the
Only
king of, he's got plenty of shows and ideas that I would love to watch happen if they were under anyone's tutelage other than him. Like, do you think I
Christine
don't
Jorgensen shows up in Ed Gein's mind palace to tell him that he's
like
not a tranny.
do you, I would just like to not like I don't want to baby girlify Jeffrey Dahmer. I don't want to, treat Ed Gein like he was a special snowflake. And and I would love to watch a mini series about Betty Davis and Joan Crawford. If anyone other than you made it,
I
literally anyone.
wanna I wanna recommend one other thing that I think is tangential to this, which is
Ooh,
the graphic novel and the subsequent film, My Friend Dahmer, which was written by a
right. Yeah.
an aspiring comic book writer who was friends in school with Jeffrey Dahmer and
Yes.
describes their time together. And it really reckons with the movie does this a little bit less, but the book really reckons with his particular situation as like being, he thinks he's the closest person that Jeffrey Dahmer ever had that wasn't like somebody that he was immediately related to. And he has a kind of survivor's guilt about that. He even thinks that Dahmer was attempting to kill him at one point and he managed to get away.
That's an
Whether he
interesting
realized it or
perspective,
not,
if nothing else.
it's a very interesting perspective. And the closest I would say to something that resembles this in terms of its relation of art and real life, horrors, real life horrors.
So I guess evaluating this has been tough just because
Right.
it's again, it's difficult to kind of like know where to begin and where to end. Like again, I do, recommend this big asterisk with if you can handle it, if it's something you're interested in, if
Same.
it's so I'm glad that I did sit through it. At the end of the day, the best way I could sort of split hairs with it is that if I was trying to do like a score for the context of this show, I would kind of split it down the middle because I was like it's kind of an even split of an experience for me, but I was like where do I go here that feels more definitive? Like what side am I leaning more towards? Because I can't do a half
The
measure
worst,
when it comes to
I would say the
rating.
worst question we ask on this show is what number feels the most correct to
Exactly. Is
stamp
that
on the
like
thing, but it's what we
I
do.
just for the purpose of this show, I guess the amount that I got out of it is that it leans more towards a 3 than a 2 for me. So like
You're so regretful about admitting it too.
it's well,
It's
it's just it's the kind of thing where it's like I don't know what perspective one is even meant to have on this thing because it's such uncharted waters of like, when you evaluate something these days, it's like you have the context of the entire history of the people making it, what people think about it now, and what the general temperature and climate and evaluation of something is. Like, everything I have on my shelf here, I have an idea of how people think about it. You go to something like this, it's just like S and people on the internet were like,
That's the thing about underground art, man. You get to make the narrative for
It's
yourself in a certain
exciting.
kind of way. It's kind of why what we do, it's part of why what we do is, we pull things out of the underground.
More or less, yeah.
I'm trying to do this a little bit of a service, even though Death Pile is long defunct and the brain behind it, Kennedy, is very happy to be doing his visual art instead of making music right now. So good for him. But I
Yeah.
wanted to reflect
Found his
on this.
passion. Good on him.
So what do we do?
I really
We're
suppose that it's
tied at
only
25. Did you do this on purpose? Did you do this to spite me? You couldn't
no.
hand me the
If I wanted to spite you, I would have intentionally given it the lower rating so that I would have won. So I
That's true.
denied
That's
a
true. Because
victory here.
I gave you the number first, so you knew the hoop you had to jump
If
through
anything,
to
this
get
should prove to
the
our
outcome that you
audience
wanted.
this should prove to our audience that these are numbers from the heart. Like we do not bullshit each other on this fucking show.
the definitions
So,
change, but the numbers always mean what we say they mean when we say them.
oh
So
God.
what do we do? I think here's what we do. Because we need to do some kind of intermission anyway, and we're about to take a break for the holidays anyway, why don't we just call this a tie and do like a big recommendation, like something long for the start of arc
Okay.
3?
Instead
Since we'll
of
have some
one
time in
person, yeah,
between,
well,
we'll just both
what,
go with one thing. Doesn't have to be anything specific. We can go either
how
direction.
how we can pitch this is that we had two arcs this year. I won the first, we tied the second. So you are technically behind. So
I
you
am.
have got to fight to even the playing field so that we can be on the same level and truly overcome each other as equals, or if I can continue my lead as the ascendant Jake and you are the
Right.
punished
Arc
Jin.
2 ends on a Ichigo Renji-esque stalemate.
Okay, okay. So
Why don't you
this
go first?
so can this has the same parameters of a victory, I guess, which is we'll each recommend one thing and it can be good or bad.
Yeah, this can be an
Actually,
intermediary episode, so this one it doesn't
okay.
have to count if we don't want it to.
No, you go first.
I want you to go
Trust
first.
me. No, trust me. You go first. I've got
Okay.
I've got a plan.
Do you remember where your baseball cards are?
Why the fuck did you just ask me that?
Go look.
What the fuck? House of Leaves is stuck in my bedside table. You fuck. I this is one of the biggest bucket list books for me. I'm sorry for conspiring with Jen. I love you, Rhiannon.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Thank you for your help.
Okay, have you read this?
I wrote a whole fucking thesis about it, dude. Are you kidding
Oh,
me?
that's right. Oh, fuck.
Got it.
Okay.
Hang on.
Okay.
Hang on. Got it right here. It's got my name on it.
Wow. So
I got it
this is a
printed.
big party.
This
Okay.
is, yeah.
Okay.
So
I
this is why.
assume I assume then that I will be able to read this thesis for what we're doing
Oh,
then.
yeah, it's online. I'll send you the link.
Okay.
We can work
Okay.
that in. We can decide not to work that in. It can be whatever.
Okay.
But no, this was the one that I was going to be like, if I won, I
Shit.
was going to. I've been planning this with Rhiannon for weeks
This rocks.
of how to pull off this little
Okay.
scheme of like, if I
Okay.
win, I'm pulling out House of Leaves for the intermediary. Since we're taking a break and you're going to have
Okay.
time to actually
Well,
read the damn thing.
I'm glad that we get to end. It's really fitting that the first phase of this show is ending on both of us getting to indulge themselves a little bit. Um, okay, because I've had an idea of something I wanted to recommend that would be unique, but it's a little, it's it's mildly self-serving. So I wanted to wait until specifically I won a round. So
Let's both indulge
it would go
ourselves a
like
little bit since I
so
definitely
yeah,
did that with my
exactly.
pick.
So okay.
Let's both do what we would have done if we had won, yeah?
Something, yeah, exactly. Something, I guess it's very in tune with stuff we have talked about. It's very spiritually something that the two of us kind of meet on in terms of our sensibilities and what we look for in fiction. It has a lot of those things. So it's very small comparatively speaking, not like in size. It's decently long. Like it, granted, I'm not sure how long it's going to take to read something like House of Leaves because I'm going to get to find it out though. So that'll be interesting. But it's lengthier, but it's on the smaller side in terms of like reception. Like not a lot of people like super duper know about it. But it's personal, I guess you could say. And thing is, it's been up in the air as to whether or not uh there would be any more of it happening in the near future. And
I think I know where this
recently,
is going.
recently, something about it. Basically, there's a new entry in it coming out, and I think it would be interesting to talk about it. An interesting place we could go. Check your phone.
Oh, I got it. Ooh, Fiction Press. Was ist das? Sorry, let me just.
Open it.
I'm opening it. Woo, baby! I have in
We
front of me, I have in front of me right now, viewers, volume one of Those Who Dwell in the Dark, Bloody Sabbath.
The longest single volume I have ever written. And because I am an indulgent piece of shit, I'm doing self promo, bitch. We're talking about my books.
All right, fine.
Fuck
You're gonna
y'all.
read my fucking thesis too. I was mincing about it,
Exactly.
but if you're
I'm
gonna
gonna
do
read your
this,
thesis.
if you're gonna
You're
do
gonna read
this,
my book.
if you're gonna do this
Bam.
to me, I'm gonna
And
make you read my thesis.
And as of right now, you can read for free Those Who Dwell in the Dark, Bloody Sabbath, Volume 1. It will be coming out on paperback and hardback on Amazon, hopefully sometime in December or January, just whenever I get it situated. But it will be in a link in the description that you can read all of my stuff for free, but we are going to talk about everything I have written and this new chapter because I notably have started writing my first standalone novel that I'm going to start shipping around to people when I'm done with it. So Those Who Dwell in the Dark is officially on a long, long hiatus, and I kind of leave off at a point where if I was never to return to this series again, I would be content somewhat where
Aside
we
from the
leave
fact that you
off
call it
here.
blood, aside from the fact that you put volume one on it, implying that there's
Yes,
gonna be more.
like it is not exactly like there's a lot of loose ends and whatnot, but if for some reason I was never able to return, this is a somewhat satisfactory place to leave off on. There's a sting of finality at the end of this story, so we will pick up
Holy shit,
there
man.
where we
This is
start in
gonna
the next year. We're going to be reviewing each other.
I really thought I'm not gonna lie, because of the way that you were describing it, I thought you were gonna throw Berserk at me.
Well, see, that's the thing. I kind of have a self-imposed like if Versus Wolves did it already, I feel bad like going to that well. Like
Same.
it feels bad. It's why I figured that Full Metal was because that's just more of a me thing anyway. So I figured that was it. That was going to be the other thing I was going to recommend is just continuing on that. But honestly, I like the way this turned out even better.
This is
Just
brilliant.
this is
This is
great.
brilliant.
So basically, that has been the first year of Jen and Jake's Bizarre Affray, and next year you will get a more complete, more refined version of this show. And boy, howdy, do I have some stuff that I have plans for. If you thought that you were the only one who planned to do some sneaky shit in the future, you've got a storm coming,
Yeah, but
bitch.
I got there first. I
All
broke
right,
the ice.
then I'll get there better.
That's what the show's all about, baby. All right.
I will get your fiance and I will wrap them in on my own conspiracy. Bam.
All right. So if you'd like to support the show, you can join our YouTube membership for the James and T channel and get access to our fan Discord where we hang out with friends of the show, talk about all the stuff that we do on here and all the stuff in between that we're listening to with our
We're
friends and
we're
we're
going to be
experiencing
doing
with our
more Jen and
friends.
Jake talk in the next year or so where we'll have some episodes available to watch and some of them will be members only like our Superman discussion which is available for members to listen to right now should they want to. And hopefully a lot more stuff in the future so we can keep giving perks and benefits for you beautiful people. Just in case this never like makes it to light, the note I will end off on is that I recently got a notification that I have had this YouTube channel for a decade. This channel is
Woo!
10 years old now.
Let's go, baby.
And I have not had a plan for a single fucking second of it. This was just a place where I would dump random edits and short films that I made in my media arts class in high school and then eventually college. And then I just decided to throw my hat into the ring YouTube wise of doing random shit. And it wasn't till 2020 where all of this formed more formally, where we kind of really found ourselves and started talking about music and art and all that shit. And I'll put it to you like this: we do this for the love of the game. We
We do.
don't make
I
money off
I
of
want to
this.
do this for the love of the game.
This
If I didn't do it for the love of the game, I wouldn't do it at all.
And that's the thing. We do it for the love of the game, and we would be here even if you all weren't. But good God, am I grateful that you all, whoever you are, if five fucking people watch this video, I do not care. You have listened to what we have had to say over the course of the year, and I am infinitely grateful that time, the most valuable resource of all, is being spent on behalf of us. So the fact that we could bring you any joy whatsoever, even if it's in this tiny, itty bitty, silly way when you need to pass time on your lunch break and you need to listen to somebody tear apart Doug Walker, look, we are happy to do the tearing. We're grateful, is all I'll say. And this year has been rocky at the start, but I'm very happy with the direction that things are headed in. And I am a lot more together than I have been in the past. And I am very, very grateful for all of my friends that have joined me, especially you doing this podcast this year has really, like, man, I've needed a good distraction this year. And this podcast has really helped.
I'm in
Really.
some that message that you sent me about the idea of the show like has changed my whole year.
It did
Like
to me in a
doing this
good
show with
way. A
you.
good way.
Yes, doing the show with you has made my whole year. I think about this all the time. I talk about this all the time with my friends. Like I I love this so much.
I occasionally suffer from a kind of executive dysfunction of just like I have all these things around me, like books and albums and stuff, and I will, and it's difficult to always be pushing yourself to experience new things. So finding a venue to both hang out and talk with my friends and push myself to do things that I would have probably taken way too fucking long to do in the first place. Like I probably wouldn't have gotten to this with before I turned 30 if Jen hadn't recommended it to me. So I am grateful that I get to talk about some weird shit.
All right. Let's take a beat in case we need to cut this
Yeah.
out, but do you want to do a shot for the first year?
Uh, Fuck.
Send it off with a salute. It's okay if not. Just a thought.
I got it. Next time on Jen and Jake's Bizarre Affray, the two of them will review their biggest obstacle yet: each other.
Oh, baby!